Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, very excited about today's conversation. Bryan Hill is back. Bryan Edward Hill, Bryan Hill, call him what you may. It's great to talk to Bryan again. I really enjoyed our first conversation. Shame on me for waiting as long as I did. Bryan doing a great body of work. Postal was an incredible series he co-wrote with Matt Hawkins for Top Cow, then took it over. So many great one-shots and various things that led to this year's breakout year. He had that great arc in Detective Comics that was kind of a backdoor pilot for The Outsiders. Outsiders coming in 2019. We get an update on the status of that. His book with Dexter Soy. He is doing Killmonger for Marvel, a great 5-issue miniseries that kind of tells a prequel story leading up to the Black Panther movie and the great moment in the comics, the encounter with T'Challa. It really fleshes out Erik Killmonger's character, and it's a great story. I compare it to Lex Luthor's journey in Smallville in terms of we know where it's going, we know where it's going to end. How did he get there? What were the steps that Erik Killmonger took to lead him where he was? And Vertigo. Man, Vertigo is back in a big way, and I've been covering that. We had a conversation with Ben Blacker about Hex Wives, and Bryan is there representing the crime aspect of Vertigo. American Carnage, a great first issue, a very intriguing idea. If you like 100 Bullets, if you like Scalped, I think this is the same kind of milieu, if you will, but it's definitely its own original story. And it's very intriguing, and it's a great start. Leandro Fernandez and Bryan are doing a great job. Dean White on colors. A really, really great first issue, and I'm thrilled to talk to Bryan about that. Plus, he's working on Titans, and I'm a convert, man. Believe me, I was a doubter. We all saw that trailer at San Diego, and we're like, yeah, grim and gritty. Yeah, it looks kind of more like Suicide Squad than something better. What the hell's going on? But I got to tell you, I'm 9 episodes in on Titans, and I really do love the show. I am okay with the changes of the core Titan members. And, man, Doom Patrol, Hawk and Dove, Donna Troy, Jason Todd, all winners. Every time any of those people step on the screen, it is fantastic. It is consistent with what you want from the DC Universe. And I'm telling you, Donna Troy absolutely knocked me out. Jason Todd was a great contrast to Dick Grayson. I almost wondered if they were going to reverse roles. And it's early Jason Todd, but it's good. I like it. And Bryan wrote the 5th episode and the 7th episode. Those were his. And I believe they're called Together. I think that's episode 5. And then Asylum. And it's great stuff. And I'm telling you, the Doom Patrol, oh my God. It's the Doom Patrol. Jeez, Gabe Hardman, I gotta text him and see if he saw it, because it's everything all of us old school Doom Patrol fans ever wanted. It's the original core group, and it's great. And of course, do we doubt Jeff Johns? It's so great that Jeff is able to play both in the comic realm and also the television and film realm, and his influence on the TV side is definitely being felt, and Bryan confirms that. So we have a nice conversation about Titans, but also Bryan and I are buzzing about Creed 2. Can't help it, man. Such a great movie. And also, Bryan isn't, he's a screenwriter and reveals some of his past projects and also some future ideas. And if you follow him on Twitter, you know that he is toying with some ideas of experimentation on some of the new digital platforms, not just streaming, but really, YouTube and some other things as well. We get into that a little bit. I urge you to follow Bryan on Twitter, because he's very interesting, and I think really shows his cards in terms of what he's thinking of. And anyone who has any sort of creative bent can learn a lot from Bryan's creative journey and where he's going with his career. So really, I'm really glad that our acquaintanceship continues to grow, and you can hear it in this conversation with Bryan Hill on today's Word Balloon. It's all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, for your support. Really excited about the support I get from the patrons of Patreon and the subscribers of Word Balloon. Word Balloon is free. It'll always be free. Got to stress that every episode. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. But if you enjoy what I do and want to help out the cause, you can subscribe to Word Balloon via Patreon. Is it worth $1 a month? Is it worth the price of a comic book a month to enhance your love of the hobby. I hope so. I try to bring you great content every month, and today's episode is a prime example of that. So you can subscribe to Word Balloon by going to wordballoon.com, clicking on the Patreon ad, or go to patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. This episode of Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics, who continue to shake things up at your local comic shop. Great hit series, things like Lollipop Kids from Adam and Aidan Glass and Diego Yapur. Margaret Bennett and Raphael De La Tour are doing great things with Animosity, A Walk Through Hell by Garth Ennis and Gordon Suzuka. They've got some great graphic novels and hardcovers that are available now. Things like Baby Teeth, Year One, hardcover from Donny Cates and Gary Brown. It's the first 10 issues of the Baby Teeth series, and it's in stores now. There's, of course, great trades from Paul Jenkins and Wesley St. Clair representing Beyonders, and Witchhammer, Aftershock's first original graphic novel. Cullen Bunn and Dalibor Talajic. It's coming in stores on the 19th, and very excited about that series. We're going to be talking to Cullen in the days ahead about that series, and also, of course, his book, The Brothers Dracul, and some other things from Cullen Bunn as well. But you don't have to wait. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books and more to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, let's get into our conversation now with Bryan Hill. Very excited to welcome him back. Funny guy, great observations, and doing great work for DC and Marvel and Vertigo. Pretty neat stuff, and happy to talk to him about it and what's going on in Hollywood, too. I can't help it, man. I'm fascinated by the evolution of movies, how streaming television has impacted films. I keep bringing it up. Stars and directors have complained about the new status quo in movie theaters and what flies. It seems like it's either got to be a kids animated movie or a YA movie or DC and Marvel fare and the like. What happened to the dramas and the buddy cop movies that would dominate a movie season and be the hits of the year? Those things aren't really making the impact that they used to. And serious dramas kind of come and go. God, I just missed Hugh Jackman's new movie about Gary Hart called The Frontrunner. Really wanted to see it, and obviously didn't make a big impact in theaters. It got decent reviews as far as I remember, but wasn't able to see it. I missed it. First Man, the Neil Armstrong movie, I missed it. I hope my Screen Actors Guild screeners have those among them so I can see them. If not, I can see them on streaming, but that's the problem, man. A lot of us wait. We don't go to the theaters for those movies anymore. We're okay to wait a couple months when they show up on streaming. So we discussed that. It's a really fun conversation because Brian's in the thick of it, pitching screenplays and working in streaming television. So I wanted to get his point of view as well. You're going to enjoy this conversation with Bryan Edward Hill on Word Balloon. Oh, that's great. 100%. So you're Bryan Hill now. You're not doing Edward anymore.
I need to clean that up.
Okay.
I don't really care.
Okay.
And I think someone asked me, and I forgot that I had said the former when I gave them the latter, and so now Comixology is confused. So I have to just clean that up. Bryan Hill is easier. There's actually a few Bryan Hills out there on Twitter. But I don't care.
Well, and I almost wondered if there were, SAG or, Writing Guild or Directing Guild Bryan Hills as well. And I figured maybe that's why you're doing the Edward as well to differentiate.
Oh, it usually, if you think there's method to something, it's not. It's me being lung-headed and
all good, man.
Making a mistake.
No, well, I noticed on the credits for Killmonger and American Carnage too, and Titans for that matter. And I'm like, all right, good, Bryan Hill, so be it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go with Bryan Hill. And I'll have some weird anomalies on Wikipedia, I guess. But I don't know. I'm still getting used to this whole professional writer thing, man. It's
whatever you're doing, it's working out, man. So it's moving in the right direction.
The suit. I'm trying to wear this suit, man.
I understand. Exactly.
Oh, we'll see.
All right, well, I'm rolling, so when you're ready, we will start.
Oh, yeah, I am ready.
All right, here we go. Bryan Hill, welcome back to Word Balloon. Man, in just a few short months, you are like all over the place. It's, like every now and then the media hype machine, and it's not, forgive the comparison, but it is kind of like, like when there's an actor out there and you see him for the first time, and then suddenly there are 3 more movies, and they just kind of like pop up like dandelions in a field or whatever. But again, these are all negative like comparisons, and I don't mean for it to sound negative.
No, that's great. I think it's a direct result of being on your show.
Oh, stop! Yeah, exactly. It's the word balloon buzz. Absolutely, man.
It's the word balloon effect. I've heard about it from a lot of people, man. It's like going on Fallon or something, man. Like you just do that, and then the rest of it is just downhill.
Truly, like the greatest compliment I get on social media is when a follower will say, "I never thought I would have read X until I heard the writer or the artist on your show, and now I'm hooked." And I always retweet it, and I always put "the system works." So I will. So that is my quote now. The system works. So very good.
Yeah, I got tons of people that checked in with me after I appeared on your show the first time.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm really grateful.
Oh, dude, are you kidding? Mutually so, sir. We hit it off the first time, and it's time to continue the acquaintanceship as it progresses. So no, absolutely, man. So congrats on all the recent stuff. I mean, last time we talked, you were in the midst of the Detective Comics arc, which I think anyone who was reading was suspecting that it was kind of a backdoor pilot for a new Outsider series, and the cat is out of the bag now, so we can at least talk about that in the near future, correct?
Yes, all true.
So when's that coming up?
Outsiders will be out next year. They pushed back the release.
Oh, okay.
And I think it has something to do with just like the scheduling stuff.
Sure.
More than anything else, like what they've got coming along and all of that. And I think they wanted to give it its own space. I'm actually grateful that they pushed it back because I've got Killmonger out there right now. American Carnage just launched, and I wouldn't want to overexpose myself with like 3 number ones in the span of 2 or 3 months. I think that's a lot of that.
I'm with you.
So I'm kind of glad that we're going to get a little bit of a window, to kind of let people get tired of me and then come read me again,
Will the collection of the detective arc be out before the first Outsiders?
Oh yeah, I think it's out now.
I wasn't sure. Okay,
people have been tweeting to me about picking it up, and I got my console a bit ago, so I do believe it's in stores now.
Cool. Oh, that's excellent, man.
It's surreal, John. Like, for a kid that grew up going to the library and checking out Batman trades because he couldn't afford to buy all the monthlies.
Sure.
It's like a trade paperback with your name on it, and it's Batman. And to see, readers who are really awesome, like talking about your work on Batman, it's really surreal. It feels like you're kind of inside someone else's life sometimes.
Well, you earned your place, man. I mean, again, as I told you, Isaac Goodhart was like, "You got to get Bryan on, man. I'm telling you, Postal, we did a great job." And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Okay. And then when I saw that you were doing the detective, I'm like, oh, yeah, Jesus. I'm like, come on, it's been too long. We got to pull the trigger and make this thing happen. And it was a great story. It was terrific, man. And again, Postal, much like the Rick Remenders, the Matt Fractions, the Bendises out there that, make their mark at one of the big 2. And then everyone goes, oh, what else have they done? It's like, funny you should ask. Why don't you check this stuff out? And,
that kind of the way that people look back into your bibliography is really fascinating, because I've had people that have read, like maybe the first thing they picked up from me is Killmonger #1, right?
Right,
because
sure.
They don't read DC, but they read Marvel, or they wanted to read a Killmonger book, and they never heard of me before. Then they see all the other stuff I've done, and they reach back and they read it, and it's a testament to the kind of the enduring quality of books, right? Like with movies and shows and that sort of thing. People might not look backwards a lot. Like I love Hannibal, for instance. I think Hannibal is some of the greatest television I've seen in a very long time. Mm-hmm. I have never seen an episode of Pushing Daisies. And I know that Brian Fuller did it.
Yep.
I know that people hold it in high regard.
I'm a fan. Yep.
I just haven't gone back to it because I've just been busy doing other things. But with books, people really do seem to check back in, and they look you up online, go to your Wikipedia page and see what else is there, and your older stuff finds a new audience, and that's great. Really
100%, man. And moving forward as you continue to do creator-owned stuff, I mean, I think it'll go hand in hand with the mainstream, and it's been fun watching that evolution of the business because, as I like to say to even older creators, when DC and Marvel was the top of the mountain. That was the goal.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, well, I grew up, I mean, I was still kind of grown, actually. I was post-college, but, like, post-college, it was still very much Wizard Magazine, right? It was still, that's what it was. And you kind of did everything to try to get noticed by the big two, and obviously the big two are still very important. But we've got this interesting kind of triangulation where you start doing indie work, and then if your indie work catches the attention of someone, you move into big two work, and then you kind of move into this parallel bit of doing indie work and big two work again, right?
Yep.
And it's coming and like returning, it's leaving and returning. Think about Gillen. Die #1 just came out, which is an amazing book. People should definitely go pick that up. And Caron has done so much interesting work in kind of both parts of it.
Yep.
So there's no real trajectory as much as there's like this sort of cycle. Of
Agreed.
Doing this, doing that, and I think that's good. It's good that it's okay and kind of precedent set that you can do big two stuff, you can do indie stuff, you can come back and do big two stuff, and I think that gives you just more options creatively.
Well, right now, like I said, where you're having a moment. You mentioned the two books that are out right now, American Carnage and Killmonger. Let's start with Killmonger. Because that's interesting. It's kind of a prequel. I mean, it happened in the comics, but anyone who had seen Black Panther will pick this up and understand where we're starting. And as you say, we know where the story's going, but it's all about the journey, because this is the things that happened, the events that happened prior to his emergence in Black Panther, correct?
Yeah, like when Will Moss and Sarah Brunstad over at Marvel, those are my editors on the project, when they reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a Killmonger miniseries, my original feeling was no. Mainly because, I felt like, I've seen that story told in comics before. I realize the movie is very popular and there's a renewed interest in the character, and Ta-Nehisi Coates is doing strong work, and Evan Narcisse did strong work in Rise of the Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
But Evan had also touched on some of the Killmonger aspects in his miniseries. So I didn't know what that would really be, and I didn't want to just do like a cash-in sort of thing. Like, well, the movie worked, so let's make more. So I had to think about it. I'm like, well, what would I really do? And I decided on not necessarily just kind of mapping out the trajectory of the character through like the spheres that turns him into the guy at Warrior Falls, but instead I wanted to do something a little intimate that was more about the thought process and how a person winds up subscribing to vengeance as like a main path, exclusive to everything else. And so I pitched them a story that I was sure they were going to reject because the Kingpin was in it, and, other Marvel characters. Sure, I think actually Will had an idea about maybe the Kingpin. So I had incorporated some stuff and did all that, but they liked it, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is a story that's interesting to me. I love the idea that after the miniseries is over, and if you read like if there's another Killmonger narrative or something that people still kind of revisit, that you might be able to see some of these events in him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, that's, to me, that's the most interesting part about doing a prequel is, now what Vader really means when he tells Luke, Obi-Wan has taught you well. Right? Like, you experience those moments.
Or I'll even say from a television standpoint, one of the best things about Smallville was you see Lex turn, and it's Lex's story. And we know where Lex is going. But it is, and it always makes, it's going to be interesting with your story, because in the case of Lex, it is very sympathetic. You got Killmonger pretty much. I mean, I've read only the first issue, obviously, but he's making vengeful choices in the street, in the bedroom. That was fantastic, by the way.
Yeah, it's fine. I knew that they were just going to tell me I couldn't do that, and they did, they didn't tell me I couldn't do it, and it stayed in there. Like, a lot of Killmonger is me seeing what Marvel would let me get away with,
Good
and they let me get away with like most of it. Well, yeah, John, Erik isn't a character that you can start off in, I think, a place of a naivete, right? Like, because the trauma hit him so early in life,
yes,
that you have to engage that, and so it's really a story about a person that has an adolescent understanding of vengeance and justice and all of that, and then comes to kind of a more mature and kind of darker relationship with those things. And the best way I can articulate that is to tell a story about a character who almost escapes it, right?
Sure.
And that's why I think it's sort of a tragedy, because
totally.
It's, think about Othello. The tragedy of Othello is if he would just talk to Michael Cassio and just ask him, "Are you sleeping with my wife?" Then all of it could have gone away. Then Iago's plan would have been revealed and all of that. And I think you have to, in these stories, hope for a better result, even though you're not really going to get one. So, without going into plot details, Erik has opportunities to live a different life. He gets opportunities to do so, and circumstances both within and kind of beyond his control kind of box him in to where we know him to be, right? Cool. And that was an interesting thing to really do. And there's a love story in this book, sort of. And I think people aren't going to really expect that. I'm really interested in how people react to that aspect of the story, because really, honestly, I did some work in Postal that was kind of around like a romance between characters. But as far as like Big Two work goes, this is kind of the first time I've done something like that. And I don't think it's something that people would expect from a Killmonger story, but it's very important to me that, you kind of see that aspect of him.
I love it. And now we mentioned the Kingpin. Can we mention the other group that he is finding himself in association with? Are these established? And because I'll be honest, man, I am more of a DC history person than a Marvel history person. So sometimes a character or characters will pop up. Is this an invention of your own, or have we seen this group before?
It's an invention of my own. So
cool.
For people that haven't read the book, in Killmonger 1, he sort of falls in through a lot of violent consequence into a group of, I would call them low-level mutants that are working with Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. And I wanted to expand the idea of what Marvel Universe characters could be involved in, and because we've got these tiers, right? So you've got the super villains, who are like the god level super villains, like your Magnetos or your Doctor Dooms, what have you. And then you have another set of costume villains who aren't necessarily like the arch gigantic stone statue sort of villains, like your Claws and those folks.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to explore how criminal enterprise would work with people who had just enough power to make them dangerous, but not really enough power to work with Professor Xavier. And I thought, this could be really interesting if it almost had a bit of a Michael Mann feel, right? Like, what do you do in the Marvel Universe when, you've got a little bit of power, but you probably can't beat Mr. Sinister in a fight, and you probably can't stop Cyclops from blasting you with a ruby red beam. And maybe you just grew up in a situation where you never met, people who knew Xavier, or you never met people who knew, like, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and you just had to figure out your way. So they're a group of kind of freelance characters that are working their way up through Fisk's empire, trying to build a life for themselves, and they're named after chess pieces. We have King, we have Rook, we have Knight. She's not Misty Knight. Some people got that confused, and that's probably my fault. But she's
okay. Yeah. I didn't. Now that's funny because I didn't think of Misty, but I honestly took them as like a Marvel version of the Royal Flush Gang.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like kind of like a more
powerful
kind of John Cassavetes, more powerful version.
I like that.
Of those folks, because Erik's world is, to me, a very grounded world.
Yeah,
right. Like, it would make some fascinating to me is, he is from kind of all of the people. He represents the people that are left behind in a way, right? The people that don't get saved and rescued or even noticed. And he's a guy that's building himself into someone that can essentially take on, almost like a divine king, right? Like that's ultimately where he has to go. Like, how does a prodigal outcast take on Pharaoh himself in the center of Egypt? And how could he ascend into a place where he could do that? So it just seemed like natural to kind of want to build his world with some verisimilitude.
Sure.
And put that kind of consequence in it, those characters are an invention of my own, because that aspect of Marvel, the Marvel U, doesn't really have a lot of stuff to pull from, and I think it should be there, and it's kind of an interesting thing. How does a crime book work in the Marvel universe? And Killmonger, in a lot of ways, is a book about crime and criminals.
Will we see other street level? Because, there are the Sons of the Dragon back in the day, and, obviously Heroes for Hire, so are there other Marvel characters that are recognizable that will show up in the miniseries?
Well, there's definitely one Marvel character that's very recognizable that shows up in the series.
You don't have to reveal.
And I think the cover actually might be out there somewhere.
Oh, okay.
So Black Widow is coming.
Makes sense. Sure.
And that and that's, I think that's going to be kind of interesting to people too, because I'm really approaching S.H.I.E.L.D. from Erik's point of view, right? So the book is in Erik's point of view.
Of course.
So the vision of S.H.I.E.L.D. in this book isn't what we're normally used to. It's almost like how a professional thief would view the CIA. Right.
Understood.
With its complexity and kind of moral gray areas and turning people into assets and the rest of it. So there's a little bit of a commentary on how an organization like that would work, and what is expendability really, and all of those things get dealt with, and how does redemption work, and what's the price of it was one of the questions I'm engaging there. So she certainly shows up, and it's a side of Natasha that isn't particularly attractive. That speaks to what you have to kind of be when you're an agent and you're involved in recruitment and all of that stuff.
I understand. Yeah.
Comes in and complicates the issue a little bit. So, Killmonger is really about Erik and how Erik is sort of failed by himself and by other people consistently. And that brings him closer and closer to the kind of crash course trajectory that we know he's going to ultimately travel.
That's great, man. And that plays into Natasha's true beginnings when we first see her in Iron Man, way back in when I was a child, when I was a toddler, basically, when that stuff was coming out. And yeah, that's great, man, because I do think we shouldn't forget about that with Black Widow. It's kind of like Hank Pym and the domestic violence thing. It's like, there's something ugly in Hank Pym. It's deep, deep down, and it's a shame. And I don't even know today if he's still merged with Ultron or not, because I know that was something recent during Civil War II and all that stuff. But, that is Natasha's flaw is, she was a dirty tricks person, putting it in CIA Nixonian kind of terms and stuff. And that should still be part of her character, and we shouldn't forget that. And it's all, it's the flaws that make the characters interesting. It's that simple.
Well, Erik as a character, I think he hates what he views are hypocrisies.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, that's really...
That's the comment about when he has his little sexual encounter.
Yeah,
I don't want to tip it. I don't even want to say it, but that was so fantastic. And then she's just like, what did he call me?
Right? Just, what? What? I'm offended, but I don't know why. But I know I should be, and I am, right? Like, there's a power to being a person who's very in tune with what they want and who is willing to express that openly. And that's what I took from Michael Jordan's performance in the movie. Because when I first started working on the thing, I did reach out to his production company
cool.
because I've taken some meetings with them, and I'm kind of friendly with that group.
Okay.
So I wanted to kind of check in, sort of tell them what I was doing and get some perspective, just to make sure that, it felt like it was kind of honoring the work that him and Ryan and Kevin had done on the movie, Kevin Feige, Ryan Coogler. While still, it is in the 616, so it is still based on the comic book universe, but I wanted to make it a bit of a syncretic work.
Yeah, you want it accessible, man. No, because, again, this is Killmonger's back on everyone's mind because of Michael Jordan in the movie. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what I look at the world around us, and we often willfully distance ourselves from the truth of what we want in the world. We're taught to be polite about it. We're taught not to just go for the thing sometimes. And Erik isn't a character who subscribes to that at all. He wants to be the most direct line between, where he is and where he wants to go. And there is a power in that certainty of desire, right? There's something magnetic about that. I mean, that's why a lot of villains and sociopaths in the real world have a magnetism, because they are, in a lot of ways, they're more clear about desire than the righteous, who can seem muddled, who can seem a little confused, who are still struggling to reconcile things. But there's a clarity in a villain who's accepted certain aspects of their nature. And that's really what Erik is. He's a shark, kind of a character that can only go forward, right? And, whether it's in interpersonal relationships or it's, doing an assassination or a criminal enterprise, whatever it is, he's a shark. He can only move forward. And really that moment was about what it would be like to be in a room with someone like that, and how rare it is that someone can be direct about things. But everything with him is about conquest. He's always fighting battles and winning wars. So you've got a character where if you have an interpersonal relationship with him, it's really a battle of wills. And so that moment there in the book, it's a seduction of sorts, but it really is, it's a battle. It's a battle he wanted to win.
Yeah. Well, she's trying to, I don't even want to say, again, I'm sure if you read the book, you know what we're talking about. If you haven't read the book, it's fantastic. It's an interlude. It informs exactly what Bryan said about Erik. He is absolutely, he must win every relationship. He must be the dominant force. And like you said, he's a shark. After the conquest, you move on. You're always moving forward. And it's great. No, it's very adult in the best way. It's not salacious. It's and I'm really glad, because I think every now and then when Marvel drifts beyond PG-13, there's all of a sudden there's all these bloggers, and forgive me, bloggers, I don't mean to generalize, but that's wrong, that's inappropriate, and it's like, shut up. These comic books are a medium. They are not a genre. Don't force them. I don't even know. I'm going to look on the cover right now if there's what the rating is.
I think it's a mature content, or it's like the MA or something like that. As I understand it, when I was growing up and I was reading comics, I always gravitated towards the ones that had a little bit of extremity, because it spoke. I mean, you're an adolescent, you're full of hormones, you're just full of energy, you got a lot of sanguine passions. You respond to that kind of stuff. And if I'm listening to, at the time, me as a kid, we're talking about a kid who's listening to heavy metal and Public Enemy, and I'm watching R-rated action films.
Sure.
That's where my headspace is. RoboCop, right?
Sure.
So, I always gravitated towards work that seemed to touch the flame a little bit. That's just kind of how my imagination works. It's funny, I did a Miles Morales one-shot, and people were like, Bryan, I like the story. You should do more Miles Morales. And I'm like, I don't think my imagination works for Miles right now. That was like pulling teeth doing that, because I really wanted it to honor what Bendis had done before, and to remain in the spirit of the character, right? And it was a lot of ooh, I got to do this, do that. It's not, maybe at some point, I will kind of have more of an all audiences, or kind of younger skewing kind of imagination wake up in me. But right now, I'm sort of working through books, and every project is a bit of a personal exorcism. So they tend to carry a certain weight. I tend to drop maybe 1 or 2 cubes in the whiskey, but I don't put any soda in there, and the whiskey is strong.
That's all right.
But all credit to Marvel for facilitating, and also Juan Ferreira. He's doing all the art. Like he's
it's
doing
gorgeous,
pencils,
man.
inks, and the colors. He's even doing the automatopoeia in a lot of the books. So he's making, because we spoke early on when we were starting the book. I'm like, I love Dark Knight Returns. I love the force of Frank Miller's work. Electro Assassin, the Bill Sienkiewicz Frank Miller book.
100%.
I read it all the time because it really opened my mind to what could be possible to do, in comics. And we talked about wanting to do something where he would turn the automatopoeia into a design element, and play with color and give color meaning and do these things. And Juan's got a great mind. He responds so well and so quickly to that kind of stuff and brings so much of his voice, to the book. There's a lot of the story over the 5 issues that's told almost strictly visually, because I just know he can do it.
That's great.
And I just kind of let him go and just go ahead and do this, and we engage Erik's spirituality a little bit, how he's not from a Judeo-Christian background. He doesn't have a Abrahamic religion that he subscribes to. He has sort of like the smoke and vapor of whatever the belief system of Wakanda is, but it's still kind of within him, and we deal with that a little bit. And I thought that would be an interesting place to go.
Interesting. Yeah.
And how do his gods view him? Do they exist? Do they not exist? Is it in his mind? Is it not? Don't really know, right? But, are they just like are we in like a Jung place where Bast, the mother goddess, is really his conscience speaking to him? Or is it actually an entity outside of him that is imploring him to reconsider? We don't really know. But I thought it could be just an interesting experience, and hopefully a book that'll have some longevity after it's finished, that people will read and kind of revisit and talk about a little bit, and maybe it'll add something just experientially to the world of Black Panther.
I'm telling you, see, if you're listening and you haven't picked up Killmonger, you're going to want to pick this up now. This is the same kind of stuff that Tom King was playing with Vision. And again, thankfully, it was a Marvel regime that said, yeah, tell that story. That's okay. It doesn't have to hook in a Civil War or whatever the main thrust is of whatever the event status quo is right now. Tell your story. And because this is a prequel, I think that makes it easier. And again, you're right. It says it does say like parental advisory on the cover, as well it should, and that's okay. I was telling you off the air, my buddy who writes for the Wall Street Journal, Cam McWhorter, his son is a very smart 14-year-old kid. And he's like, I was thinking about Killmonger, and I'm like, yes. I'm like, I go, and hey, I talked to him, had the father talk, and I'm like, there's a little sex in there, but it's done tastefully. And he checked out the book, he flipped through, and he goes, no, this is okay, And I haven't had a chance to hear how the kid felt about it. Actually, he was flying back to Atlanta today, but no, I'm excited because the kid's a smart kid, and he really does like good, edgy stuff. Well, and sometimes not being a father, I'm like, I don't want to, give the kid the wrong book. But again, his dad, the kid's a smart kid. And, dude, this is the same thing that I've said before. I was 9 when I read Jerry Conway's Death of Gwen Stacy story.
For sure.
And and it wasn't sex. It was like an extreme moment of violence. And it blew my mind in the best possible imaginative and creative way of stories can have consequences. And it's not always they lived happily ever after. Bad things can happen. And it didn't corrupt me in any way. It blew, like I said, it blew my mind in a very cool, creative way of, wow, this stuff can really mean something. And I've felt that way ever since I read that story.
Well, for me, I'm not a father myself. I'm not a parent. But I was a teacher for a little bit because I had to make ends meet. So I was a substitute teacher for a little while, and I used to work with, the 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, what have you. What I don't want to do is show violence without consequence.
Yep.
Because I think that is when you're reinforcing the idea that there's no consequence to violence, I think that can be negative for any mind at any age. What I try to do is present, as it's a heightened reality, but it's still the stark reality of consequence. So there's moments in Killmonger 1 where, Erik dispatches with a fella in the book, but you see like the kind of the physical toll it takes on him. You see like a mental toll it takes on him, the adrenaline kind of running out of his system. Like it's for me, it's just about making sure it's not propagandic. In my Batman detective run, I mean, there's some violence in there. I mean, I've got a woman
Absolutely.
that can fire, and but it's supposed to be horrifying, and it's supposed to leave that feeling with the reader, because it's important in a book like Batman to make sure we all understand why we need Batman.
Sure.
And that's when I do superhero comics. That's what I think about, is making sure that the book explicitly demonstrates the necessity of the hero, so that we understand why he exists in Gotham and how he protects us, and we understand what happens when he fails. So I trust the minds of readers a lot, and I think young people, if they pick up my work, I think that they get something that's honest and feels true, to them, and can help kind of lead them around some of these emotions. I mean, part of Killmonger is a letter to anyone that feels themselves on the precipice of giving themselves over to anger. And I'm kind of demonstrating where that leads you, right? And I'm being honest about it. There is some power in it. And you can accomplish some things that way. But there's also a price. And do you want to pay the price? Right? Like, is it worth it to you? And for me, it wasn't. When I was an angry kid, and I had to let that go because just the price of anger was just too steep. So in a lot of ways, I'm sort of writing to my younger self in my work, because I know that none of us live in a bubble, and we're all unique, but we're not separate. So there are plenty of other versions of the younger me that are out there that are encountering comics now as I did back then, and I'm sort of keeping them in mind when I work.
I can't wait to hear this kid's reaction to Killmonger. And now I might also recommend American Carnage to him as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, it's funny. The younger readers who've read American Carnage are less traumatized than the older readers. Like, the younger readers are just like, oh, this is like a cool crime story. I would have dig this, and this is interesting, and that's the. But it's like it's the adults. It's like people in their 40s who are like apoplectic about that book.
Are they really? Are you getting grief?
You know what? Here's the thing.
Tell me.
I have a very interesting relationship with people on social media. While I'm explicitly liberal, and I'm liberal to the point where I'm antinomian in my belief system, honestly. But I try to be like considerate and patient with people when they have differing points of view. And I have a really eclectic group of folks that interact with me on social media. I mean, I don't have a lot of time these days because I'm doing the writer's room in the day, but when I'm on hiatus and I'm working and researching, I talk quite often. And I think I've built up some credit with people. So I haven't gotten a lot of pushback. I've gotten some people that disagreed with things said in the book, and that's fine. You expect that in a book like American Carnage. It's about a guy going undercover into a white supremacist movement. So,
yep. Very Donnie Brasco-esque, going into a white supremacist group, and a guy who, much like Black Klansman, can, at least, as opposed to Black Klansman, this is a guy who passes as white. Is light-skinned enough who passes for white. The
protagonist can, he can pass for white. And it's also set in contemporary California. It's set in Los Angeles, right? So, like Black Klansman is period South, and there's a lot of period South when they discuss these issues. But I wanted to do something that happened now. I wanted to do a story like this in a blue state to sort of shatter some of the misconceptions about where these ideologies live and breathe, right? Some people, have been offended, but most of it is... Unfortunately, we live in an age now where characters instantly become symbolic of anyone who looks like them, especially in comics. And I've had to tell people, just because a character that looks like X says Y doesn't mean I think everyone who looks like X believes Y. Right?
Well, that's why I'm laughing, because the idiocy, and forgive me, but it's obviously, it's like, my God, they're not necessarily talking about you. Maybe if you see yourself in that, that's the problem, not the story itself. But it's like, come on, man. Jeez. Even as something as benign as people who don't like the Big Bang Theory. Well, I don't like the way nerds are projected that way. And I'm like, well, I'm a nerd, and I don't see myself on that show. If you see yourself on that show, maybe that's, your own problem with yourself. And it's like, check yourself. It's not the story. I don't know.
If I'm watching Starsky and Hutch, I don't worry about being Huggy Bear, right? Like, I'm not Huggy Bear. It's fine. But it's an interesting phenomenon. So, like, a fella, tweeted at me the other day, and we have had plenty of fine conversations, and, I don't know him personally, but we talk online sometimes when I have the time. And he was very irritated with me that the antagonist of the book, a fellow named Win Morgan, who...
The candidate, right? Isn't he is he in office, or is he running for office?
He is gathering attention around his political ideology, right? Okay. He has something of like a grassroots movement that hasn't yet sprouted into a candidacy or anything, but he's on the scene, right? And he kind of represents the kind of rise of fringe intellectualism, that I see out there, without making him a direct analogy to anyone. I mean, he's not this guy or that guy or this lady or that lady. He's his own character.
Yeah.
But at some point he claims to be a libertarian, or I think one of the characters says he claims to be a libertarian. So a fellow that was a libertarian took great umbrage with that, because I was equating libertarianism with white supremacy. And I told him, well, one, I didn't say that. The character said that. Two, I didn't say it was true.
Right. Well, exactly, man, because that is a tactic of some extremists to normalize their agenda. And certainly libertarianism is whatever and it really helps with the actual definition of the idea itself, that it's, everyone's kind of on their own, and therefore they can interpret, that type of libertarianism as its own thing. And I think there are inconsistent slices of libertarianism. That's my own perspective on it.
And my point to the fellow was, well, what you're really irritated with is a narcissistic sociopath co-opting your political ideology for their own ends, which you should be. Absolutely. Because he's the bad guy.
Right.
So it's yeah, but I think because I don't fly off the handle, and I have a firm belief that all energy returns to its source, and that's probably the basic tenet that I run a lot of my kind of social behavior on, life behavior, what have you. You get back what you put out. So because I'm not pointed or argumentative, and I don't run ad hominem attacks on my Twitter feed or any of that stuff,
I understand.
I think that people aren't quick to do that with me. So even when they're irritated with me, the worst I get is like, yeah, I don't really want to go on this trip with you, but I'll get Outsiders when it comes out. Or I liked Killmonger a lot. And that's, I'll take it.
Sure.
I like Raging Bull. I love Goodfellas. Kundun, not my favorite movie.
There you go.
That's gonna happen with artists, right?
Oh my God, I'm like that with Aaron Sorkin. I don't like everything. I think he's a very talented guy, but I don't like everything he writes. But I'm not going to harangue him about it. Again, that's comic books, man. That's the thing. As evidenced by this podcast, because here you are. But I mean, that's the thing. Everyone's very approachable. You wouldn't think of like writing Aaron Sorkin going, yeah, Studio 60, you're full of shit. I just want to tell you that.
Yeah.
You're like Jim Zub, and I credit you for having that ability of taking a negative comment and handling it as you do, and truly, and doing it in a very easy, relaxed way of, okay, we'll agree to disagree. It's not a big deal. This is where I'm coming from. All I can do is explain what I'm trying to do with the story. And if it's not your thing, no problem. See you later.
Well, when you're dealing with people through social media especially, I have no idea what someone is going through when they tweet me, right? I just don't know. I don't know what their day is like, what their week is like, what their year has been like. And, they could have just been in a bad mood because of something that happened completely outside of anything I've done. And, it landed, kind of on my Twitter feed. So I try to kind of pull people towards more civil conversation, whenever possible. And by and large, that works. I don't like fanning the flames of division and all of that. I don't think that's particularly useful. And frankly, John, when I was looking at writers who I admired, I think I would have had a lesser experience with their work if I would have seen the writers move into pettiness. I wanted to believe that the people that were writing the things that I read and enjoyed had somehow escaped the pettiness that I was dealing with every day, and had a different sort of point of view. And so I try to get to kind of maintain that and live that way. And I think it's just awesome that someone bought my book and is mad at me about it. Like, that's incredible, right? Like I'm not used to that yet.
I understand. You elicited a reaction in them through your work. No, I hear you. That's incredibly. Yeah, they noticed you. Wherever they're coming from, they noticed your work. Absolutely, man.
So I just have so much gratitude to be able to experience that some random person that I've never spoken to before bought something of mine, read it, felt a thing, decided that they had to come yell at me about it. That's an incredible thing for like a kid from St. Louis, Missouri. That's amazing. So
there you go, man.
I love everybody, man. Thank everyone for participating.
How are we getting along? And you're from Cardinal country, and I'm from Cubs country. I'm very surprised right now.
Oh, because I'm not much of a baseball fan.
Okay, there you go. Oh, and honestly, you're from the Spinks brothers country, so I have that much more. From a boxing standpoint,
much more of a fight fan. Much more.
Well, Brian, do you know I'm doing a boxing podcast as well?
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
I started it in September. Well, I wrote for Ring Magazine and Boxing Illustrated for a few years, and then also broadcasting. Really, from 1990 till 2006, I was going to fights and again doing not only the magazine reports but doing a lot of radio reporting as well. And as you know, boxing has just become, I think, interesting again. I mean, I kind of checked out for...
Yeah, it's coming back, right? I feel like
Absolutely.
Boxing is having a resurgence. I feel people are getting more and more into it now, and boxing is sort of... I mean, UFC kind of had taken over everything. Mixed martial arts has taken over everything. Yeah. But I feel like the narratives in boxing are still kind of unmatched.
Agreed.
And the controlled chaos of mixed martial arts can get exhausting sometimes. And
it's kind of everything blended together. I know Bert Sugar, my dear friend and former publisher of Boxing Illustrated and Ring Magazine, felt the same way. He's like, that's an invented sport. It's too much, and it's the disciplines and what you can't do in boxing, and just the regiment, kind of way that they have to fight and everything. That's its own controlled kind of chaos that you can appreciate more. I think it's incredibly dramatic. It can get incredibly dramatic. Just like, I mean, we're talking about 2 weeks after that great heavyweight fight that Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury just had. And it wasn't a great fight, but the anticipation was there. And every round you were just, all right, now what's going to happen? And it really was, it was entertaining. I don't know how rewatchable it's going to be. I haven't rewatched it on Showtime yet, but I appreciated it as it unfolded because it really was a mystery in terms of what's going to happen next because you really didn't know.
Well, there's, I'm a terrible martial artist, but I am a martial artist, right?
Okay.
So I have some familiarity with MMA and how that works, but very quickly it just turns into people doing things to each other on the mat that I don't really understand, but other people do, and then it's over, right? And boxing remains, I think, relatable the entire time.
Yeah.
We understand throwing, your right hand and your left hand.
Right. Slugging, punching, striking.
Slugging, punching, it's innate. Like, we get it. It's a part of our atavistic mind.
Yeah.
And you can sort of fall into that a little easier. Sometimes UFC stuff can almost get esoteric in what they're doing, depending on who's fighting. And then like the kind of the way that the boxing champion kind of holds the belt for a while and all of that.
It's like a gunslinger. You got to prove yourself every time. It's like, are you still the chip? Are you still the best? And there's always somebody gunning for you.
I think that Conor McGregor match I think did a great service to like the sport of boxing. Right.
Dude, literally, I felt the sport was on the line with that fight.
Totally.
Because if McGregor had won, it really would have, like, boxing would have just been driven further into the netherworlds that it's been dwelling in. And now I'll say this, and I want to know your perspective, and I appreciate this boxing tangent for a moment, because as first of all, watching Conor McGregor prepare for the fight, and that the only sparring they showed was that brief moment where he knocked down Paulie Magliani, and I was really proud that Paulie like stepped up and said, "Look, I know this is hype for the fight. I understand that I was there for Conor to get better, and Conor's the focus, but I am a fighter. I have a reputation." Yeah, he caught me with one punch. What you didn't see are the many times I knocked him down. And it really was McGregor stepping into Mayweather's sole discipline of boxing and punching. And even at 40, and it's the most flat-footed, no-legs Mayweather I ever saw. He was walking around like a guy picking up trash. He had there was no gallop to his movement, nothing. He was totally flat-footed, let McGregor punch himself out, and still had enough skill in his 40s. And lighter weight fighters age a lot faster than middleweights and heavyweights do, and still knock him out the way that he did. And, thank God, because, again, I really think it proved it's like, look, MMA is great, but if you're really going to stick to one discipline and it's boxing, you better know how to punch and punch for 12 rounds. And that's not easy to do. And that's what I think makes boxing – again, from a pure punching standpoint, superior to MMA.
Well, yeah, and look, like, if you do jujitsu to somebody in a street fight, you're probably going to jail, right? Like, that stuff is meant to kill people, right? That's not. It isn't. It's self-defense, but it's self-defense like it said in a martial way. So, like throwing punches. If you're gonna be really great at a thing, I would still say be a really great boxer, because you're able to control the situation in a way that's a lot less savage than kind of MMA applied in the street goes.
You remember when you were younger, it was only legal in like a couple states, and in the 90s when I was on sports radio and I'd be talking boxing and we'd open up and have a boxing segment, I'd get MMA fans calling in and going, "How come you're not talking about MMA?" I'm like, "Because it's illegal in 48 states." And they're like, "Well, it's superior to boxing." I'm like, it's kind of brutal, man. And thankfully, people like Dana White and the others of the UFC, because they went to the athletic commissions of all the states and said, "Okay, what do we need to do to clean this up," air quotes, and make it more palatable for you to license this? And they're like, "You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this." And they said yes to everything. And they found a way. And that's why MMA elevated from the Royce Gracie years, as great as those years were for diehard fans, but it became more of a sport. And I do think that it's progressed as far as the way that it's practiced in the octagon. I do think from a business standpoint, it's still a pretty tight monopoly, but what are you going to do? And that's for others to decide how to better, regulate the sport. But again, yeah, it's very interesting. And again, you'll notice as we're talking, Mayweather's supposedly, going to be fighting this exhibition in Japan, fighting a kickboxer, but they're boxing. They're not kickboxing. So all they're doing is punching again. And it's, and Mayweather has pretty much said, "No, I'm not going to fight mixed martial arts," because he knows better. Because when the boxer does walk in and has to face the jiu-jitsu expert or the great grappler or whatever, it's never ended well. I have yet to see a boxer walk into MMA rules and succeed.
Well, I tell you what, man, if you're standing up with somebody and they jump at your legs, that has to happen to you about 400 times before you stop freaking out. Like, it's a weird thing, right? Like, you because your instant kind of feels like, "Oh my God, I have no idea what's happening," and you just kind of turtle up, and then they can just do their stuff. And look, like mixed martial artists are incredibly skilled and very, very, very dangerous. But for me, I think I just relate. If I had to pick a great MMA fighter or a great boxing match, I would always pick the boxing match because, boxing is a sport. it's not necessarily about pummeling the hell out of the other person until they don't look like a person and look more like a vegetable, right? It's a little different, and there's a skill and a finesse to it that I appreciate in an athletic sense. And I do like watching MMA stuff, and there's some fighters that I like more than others.
Oh yeah, sure, agreed.
But yeah, I think it's important, and I'm glad for the culture of sport that boxing is having the resurgence. I mean, I think the Creed movies honestly have a lot to do with it too, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Well,
and again, and seriously, I want to get back to American Carnage. This is a good promo for my boxing podcast, the Big Bout Podcast.
Yeah, right on.
Part of the Word Balloon Network, and we'll get to Creed 2 at the end of the conversation. But yeah, I thank you for tolerating this. For those of you who are like, all right, enough of the boxing talk. Can we get back to his comic books for Christ's sake?
Sorry, I was talking fighting, and we went on a tangent.
Well, again, we're both fight fans, and like I said, I'm glad to hear that because I wanted your opinion. I'm going to talk to Tom King about his Walmart Superman series.
Oh yeah,
that revisited Galactic Boxer Superman.
Sure.
so, and I was thinking I should put that on the Big Bout podcast as well. So yeah, and I'm like, Tom and I should talk boxing on there. Brian, you and I are going to have to talk boxing on the Big Bout podcast if you've got the time.
For sure, I'd love to.
That'd be great. Excellent. All right, so back to American Carnage. By the way. The artist, Leandro Fernandez, I've been a fan of a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And
great.
Just like his work with Rucka on Queen and Country, I'm glad you guys have. Did you ask for him, or were you put together? How did that happen?
Well, so when Andy Curry, who's my editor on that book over at DC Vertigo, he had a list of artists that he wanted me to take a look at, and I knew Leandro's work from Queen and Country too, because I'm a huge Queen and Country fan. Rucka's work has always been a big influence on me. So the instinct for a book like American Carnage might initially be to kind of go in like a Mitch Gerrard's sort of direction, right? Like something that's not necessarily photorealistic, but it's grounded in a way in terms of its anatomy and how the characters are constructed and all that. I felt like the world of American Carnage is just too stark and ugly to be that literal. And what I like about Leandro's work is he draws people and their drawings, but they still have the subtleties of people.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's what we need.
Agreed.
Because if people get this book and they open it up and it looks like life drawing, then I think it just might be too much. I think it just might, there be no easy way for people to make it palatable. So, and it's rare that you can find someone that can stylize but also express subtlety like he can. And the great thing about working with Leandro is he thinks through everything he's doing. I've been really lucky, like with Juan on Killmonger and Leandro, with Miguel and Felipe on Detective. I've Dexter Soy, he's working on Outsiders with me. That's not out yet, but it's coming out.
Okay, I was wondering who's going to do Outsiders, but okay, very cool. Whoop.
Very thoughtful artists that all have different styles, but they all are very thoughtful about what they do, and they respond to the script and they add to the script in ways that I could never do, no matter how many drafts I've written. So Leo's work on American Carnage is amazing. I mean, I just saw like a page today, and it's just like a page of gentle character interaction, but it doesn't really need words. Like I could just take the words away, and I think it would still have the same meaning. And it's like having a great director. I guess it's like having Cary Fukunaga, directing your scripts for True Detective, right? Like you can be Nick Pizzolatto, and you can time is a flat circle. You can write all that stuff as much as you want, but you need a director who can come in and visualize that and kind of give it the gravitas and the weight that you want it to have. And as the book goes on, we bring more of that Michael Mann kind of feeling and bring up Michael Mann again. We bring more of that kind of LA crime feel kind of comes into the book, and it goes to some unexpected places. I think so. It'll be interesting to see, how people react and respond as the book continues.
And Dean White, is that your colorist?
Yeah, and Dean is amazing because color has, I think a lot about color. I think a lot about the psychological effect of color. I can't draw, and I'm a photographer, but I can't draw. But I do think about what color means. I read Joseph Albers and study that, and I think about how color can help augment or accelerate an experience. How it can have thematic meaning, and Dean's work does do that. Color has meaning. He uses color to represent certain things, and you can kind of track that across the book. I tell people that the last page of every issue is almost its own tarot card.
Interesting.
So as you get through like the first 5 or 6 of those books, and I think the first arc is 6 issues. It's like the last pages of each book to kind of tell their own story in a way. And the story is also told in the color choices and all of that. There's layers kind of going on in there. And that's largely due to the collaborators I have. And Pat on letters is amazing. So yeah, we've just got a really good group. I've been very lucky with my collaborators to have worked with people that are better at their craft than I am in mine, so they make me look better.
Well, I would also say, too, and I've already had Ben Blacker on talking about Hex Wives, and your book, it's really part of the Vertigo resurgence because you kind of represent that 100 bullets scalp kind of neighborhood, and a border town and Hex Wives have the magic thing going on. And forgive me, I forget the creator that's doing the other Vertigo book that's and I don't know if you know right now, and I can't remember.
Well, Zoe Quinn and Robbie Rodriguez have Goddess Mode. That's on the way.
Yeah. Okay.
Ben Blacker's Hex Wives, that's out there.
Yes.
Rob Sheridan, and I forgot the artist. He's got a book called High Level. That's a really interesting. It's a beautifully illustrated book. It's like a sci-fi kind of sort of post-apocalyptic sort of thing with some interesting kind of sociological twists in there. So that's coming along, and
okay.
And yeah, John, when Vertigo approached me about doing something as part of the relaunch, I told them I don't really have a magical realism project right now.
I understand,
because I assumed that's what it. I knew Sandman was coming, and I figured they wanted me to do what if Beyonce was ISIS or something, and and while that's interesting to
by
me,
the way, I'd pay for that.
Oh yeah, I could start from scratch on that. But
that's a great dude. You got to talk to Jeff tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
There's Beyonce's DC Universe movie right there, man. Exactly. Make her ISIS.
Just hook that right up, right? And I was like, why? I'd be starting from scratch on that with the timeline they needed to kind of bring in like a pitch and all of that. I'm like, well, I have this crime thing, and I told them I guess it's my scalped 100 bullets influence sort of work.
Yeah,
and they really responded to it because they didn't have a crime book as part of the lineup, like a pure crime book.
Sure.
And I think it's worked out well for the whole line. I think to have this touch of variety in there. And in Leandro's work, it's different than Rizzo's work, Eduardo Rizzo.
Oh yeah, so in 100 Bullets, sure.
But you can see just kind of the feeling of it can be similar at times.
Agreed. Absolutely. No, that's I didn't even think of that, and also Guerra as well on Scalped and everything. I mean, that's the thing. No, and that's what made Vertigo great. It was fantasy, but also there was always the crime element as well. And I'll tell you, Ali Master's Kitchen was fantastic. And that kind of came at a very low point, I think, in general for Vertigo, where maybe people weren't paying attention. But I saw it. Yeah, I do, and I did know that, and I'm so glad because it really is an excellent work.
He's a great guy. I talk to him on social media all the time. Ali is amazing.
That's cool. I had him on both to talk about The Kitchen and also a Boom series that he was doing a couple of years ago. And yeah, he's a Twitter buddy, absolutely. And I'm always got my eye open in terms of what he's got coming next. But yeah, I was a huge fan of The Kitchen. I thought that was just terrific. And it will make an amazing movie, much like Road to Perdition. It's like, you're going to see that and then you're going to tell someone that doesn't know, oh, by the way, that was based on a comic book. What? Really? I
tell people that about A History of Violence. People are like,
100%.
what are your favorite comic book movies? And I'll be like, Dark Knight, Dawn of Superman, A History of Violence. They're like, that wasn't based on a comic book. And I'm like,
All right, let's take a break from our conversation with Bryan Hill and tell you a little bit more about our sponsor today, of course, Aftershock Comics. It's Christmas season. I keep saying it, and I truly do mean it, because a lot of times we go to the store and we're going to buy something for a friend who we know is into comics, but we know his pull list or her pull list. What do you do if, it's not, something like that? Where do you go? You want to get him something. Aftershock is a great option because, as you know, they've got top creators. Mike Martz and Joe Pruitt, they've got a lot of friends in the comic book business, and when they went to work at Aftershock Comics, they were very smart, and they reached out to their very talented friends and acquaintances and said, come on board. What kind of ideas do you have? What aren't you able to do at DC and Marvel? Come do it here at Aftershock Comics. Clean slate, clean platform, new ideas, fresh ideas. And they have intrigued a lot of my friends that are doing some amazing work for them. Steve Orlando, Paul Jenkins, certainly our friend Frank Thierry doing with Oleg Akunev Pestilence, which is the first series about the Black Plague in the 14th century, revealed to be the first zombie outbreak. Things like that. Monstro Mechanica from Paul Aller, a great book that I really do appreciate, and I've got the trade, and I really enjoyed that. It was all about Leonardo da Vinci, and we all know how futuristic he was with his designs. Well, he comes up with, a wooden mechanical robot, Monstro Mechanica. Really interesting idea. There's things like Jimmy's Bastards, of course, from Garth Ennis and Russ Brown. We mentioned earlier Baby Teeth from Donny Cates and Gary Brown, covering the first 10 issues in the Year One hardcover that's available now this month. And there's Witchhammer, Cullen Bunn and Dalibor Talajek's first original graphic novel for Aftershock. That's coming in comic shops next Wednesday, the 19th. These creators came to Aftershock to tell their kind of stories with no rules, no forced continuity, just a new platform to tell fresh, great ideas. And this is where you can do your shopping and find a great gift for your friend who's a comic fan. And this way it's something outside of their pull list. You buy something like Pestilence from Frank Thierry and Oleg Akunev, and their first trade is available now. Second trade is coming out in January, so if they really like it, they can immediately pounce in just a couple weeks and get the next volume of Pestilence. Really great stuff. Interesting genres. There's hero books. There are sci-fi books. There are great World War books from people like Garth Ennis who know what they're doing. You can get a great art book. Jim Starlin's art book is now being put out through Aftershock, and that is available as well. Don't take my word for it. In the weeks ahead, I'll be talking to more Aftershock creators about their books, but you don't have to wait. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, let's get back to our conversation now with Bryan Edward Hill on Word Balloon. My favorite example of where movies are right now, and what I think would have literally 20 years ago been like a summer hit all summer long, was Two Guns, the Boom series. And, Stephen Grant, one of the finest Punisher writers ever. And yeah, it's like, and I love talking about that with Ross Ritchie of Boom. And it's like, not, and luckily it was enough of a hit and certainly found its audience in DVD and cable afterwards. But I'm like, isn't that interesting? Because if this thing had come out in the late 90s, this would have been like the summer buddy cop movie that everybody wanted. You got two A-list actors, great story, very funny, fun action and everything. I'm like, what the hell? And again, it shows where the movie-going audience is now as opposed to 20 years ago.
Well, I worked with Adam Siegel on another project, who is the producer of Two Guns.
Oh.
And I was working with him kind of right after I think the movie had come out. And so we were talking about it, and Adam, he was saying, kind of the same thing you are. Just like, Adam really loves those, like, Dick Donner, Lethal Weapon movies.
Totally, yes.
Like the Walter Hill movies.
Yes.
48
Hours, yes.
I do too, yeah. And it's, I think Two Guns, I'm glad that people are finding the movie and enjoying it and have continued to do it. That's the power of Denzel Washington and like Mark Wahlberg.
100%.
People will see your movie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Don't worry. People will see your movie, right? But But yeah, I think Hollywood is figuring out how to do star vehicles because they forgot for about 8 or 9 years how to do it. And part of the problem is the budget ranges have gone really big and then really small, and the middle is gone.
Yes. Isn't that interesting, Brian? Yes.
Yeah, those projects that used to vehicle actors are gone now. So actors go from, doing like a small movie or the TV show to suddenly being a superhero in a $200 million film. But they're the superhero. It's not necessarily a vehicle for them. And they haven't done the 6 or 7 mid-range movies that, Tom Cruise did before he turned into Tom Cruise, right? Like, they don't make Cocktail anymore, right?
Right. That's right, though. You're right. You're under it.
Yeah, you used to get like a steady stream of these pictures. Right. And they would,
vehicles.
They would build up like an actor's resonance in popular culture so that when you blew them out into a bigger movie, there was a familiarity there. But now it's like, well, we're going to put you in Thor, and then we're going to put you in Black Hat. But nobody wants to see Thor in Black Hat. So that movie doesn't really work, and it's a weird thing. Hollywood's figuring it out.
But I also think, and again, because you have a foot in this world with Titans and what's going on with streaming, you get things like the Kaczynski method on Netflix. Yeah. And if people who, and I'm glad you know what I'm talking about. So for listeners who don't know, this is the Michael Douglas, Alan Arkin miniseries. Chuck Lorre, the guy behind 2.5 Men, and got everything from Dharma and Greg to Big Bang Theory and, 5 or 6 other shows in between that I'm not thinking of, if not 10 other shows that I'm not thinking of. But what would have been an indie film and probably found a nice niche kind of, midstream popular film audience, now instead it's a Netflix series. And I'm wondering if the vehicle that used to show up in theaters, now the place for vehicles and the platform for vehicles is streaming television. Because even before that, it seemed like with shows like Damages, and shows and The Shield and shows like that, that was the place where the star, Feud right now, and I know they're probably doing another storyline on FX with Feud, but the Bette Davis, Joan Crawford miniseries and stuff. I mean, that's and you had Susan Sarandon and. Jessica Lange. Wasn't it Jessica Lange? No.
Yeah, I think it was Jessica Lange, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, but yeah, so that's where these stars, and that's why, like Michael Douglas made a career of vehicles like Black Rain and,
like Black Rain. Like, nobody remembers Black Rain, like.
I love Black Rain. Great Yakuza movie if you haven't seen it. Oh,
totally. Great Greg Allman song. When all the rest are gone, I'll be holding on.
Fantastic.
It's a great thing. I think it was 89, and 89 was the year of the bat, so nobody remembers Black Rain. But yeah,
Dark
you're
Blue.
Right.
Dark Blue sat on a shelf for a couple of years.
Absolutely.
Kurt Russell's movie, great movie about a corrupt cop. Found it finally. They put it out. It kind of finds its audience again on cable after the fact. And yeah, that's because the remaking. They're already doing it. You got the new MacGyver. You got the new Magnum. And it's so funny. A friend of mine and I were talking about the new Magnum, and he was a hardcore fan of, the Selleck show. And he's like, I'm just not getting into it. It's like, yeah, because it was Selleck. It was a vehicle for Selleck.
Because you can't recreate Tom Selleck. Right?
Absolutely. Yes.
It's a unique thing. And
Ving Rhames can't be Kojak. We love Ving Rhames. Right. But not as Kojak. That was wrong.
He's not telling, because those things were so keyed in to the thing they say in television is, the first season, the actors work for you. The second season, you work together. The third season and going on, you work for the actors, right?
I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that about several shows where I know some behind-the-scenes people and stuff. So, yeah, I get that. No, and it's okay. I mean, that's as it should be. It's all right.
Yeah,
the star's the quarterback, as it was told to me years ago. So I get it.
If audiences are connecting with, this actor in this performance, then, yeah, you just want to kind of promote that and see where you can take that. But yeah, I do think that streaming is well, we're in this kind of great period for content creators because there is it's a warm war. I don't want to say it's a hot war. I don't want to say it's a cold war. It's a warm war between streaming platforms. So everyone needs content because everyone's trying to like get there and get their audiences and do the whole thing. Like Netflix is shifting it around and they want to kind of build their whole thing around stuff that they own so that they're making like more of the revenue off of that. And
sure.
And Titans is on the DC streaming service and, Star Wars is going to be on something. It's, so there's just a lot of platforms and all those platforms are going to need content. And I think they're going to need cost efficient content. So what would normally have been, like an indie film or a low-budgeted genre film, I think you're going to see more of those on streaming services, either as one-off movies to kind of test the waters for a concept, or as series, and to see like how they go. And I don't know anything, but I think it'd be really interesting to, as Disney and DC start doing their things, like almost like mirroring what DC Comics does in animation in the streaming space. How they'll make like Constantine City of Demons as an animated feature. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, you could probably just do like a streaming movie and see if that takes, it's technology has a lot to do with the art of film. And it's easy to forget that because it's easy to think that what you experience is what it always has been and what it forever will be. So every generation kind of remembers their experience with motion pictures as the way motion pictures were when they were doing the things right. But it's all different now. Now you have so much access to so much content. The relationship of the viewer to content is completely different than when I was growing up.
100%. Jesus, I'm about a generation ahead of you and stuff, and feel the same way. And yeah, it's very, very interesting. And again, what people were willing to go to the theater when we were younger is different than what's happening now. And like you said, the studios are figuring it out or trying to. I loved, and I don't know if we talked about this in our last conversation, but certainly this summer when Jodie Foster was kind of frustrated with where films are right now. And it's like, Jodie, fine, you can't change the tides and the waves that are crashing on the shore. What you can do is ride them and, like, okay, go to Netflix and make your passion project there, or Amazon or any of these other streaming places, because I think you can do it. And, again, as evidenced by the Michael Douglas, Alan Arkin series, because it's a great story. It's an 8-part story. It absolutely plays well. Everyone is doing what they would be doing on a big screen, and it totally works on Netflix, and it was fantastic. And Mrs. Maisel is on its second season in Amazon. And, I'm a massive comedy nerd. Sure. So I love the idea of setting, exploring stand-up in the 50s in the Lenny Bruce era. And obviously it was that much harder for a woman to break through and work Blue. And it's a great story. It's fantastic. And, I'm midway through the second season. And it's like, yeah, this is where that stuff can live. And that's where I think mid-range Hollywood, we're talking about budgets for indie movies and stuff. And, yeah, something, sorry, Jodie, maybe you can't make $20 million a movie anymore. The numbers may not be there to support that. Is it okay? Can you do it for $5 million and do it on Netflix or Amazon? I'm shrugging. I'm like, is it that big of a difference?
Well, I try to look at these things kind of, what would Orson Welles do? What would Stanley Kubrick do? Right. So we tend to look.
They would be thrilled, and especially Orson Welles would be thrilled in this environment, don't you think?
We tend to look at people like Welles and Kubrick based on the work that they've done, and we put them on the shelf as purists of form, that they would be dogmatic about form. But that's not true at all. Kubrick would make something on Instagram.
Exactly.
So we'd look at that and be like, okay, what is the most interesting thing I can do with this format?
Yep.
Right? Like, how can I make that work? Wells would be all over that. Like, what can I do with this?
Did you see the documentary? And
yeah.
Have you seen it? I have. You see, I'm saving for people who don't know, Wells's last film, The Other Side of the Wind, was tied up in legal knots for decades. And they finally untangled it, and they're finally released it. It's on Netflix. And there's also a supporting documentary called They'll Love Me When I'm Dead. And it's all about that period when he was making what would be his final film. And it's fascinating. And I've only seen the documentary. I'm saving the movie for other movie buffs to watch with me because it's also, it's going to be, I haven't seen it yet, the whole thing, just the clips that are in the documentary. It's going to be one of those experimental 70s kind of fever dream sort of movies, a lot of stream of consciousness. I know there's a movie within the movie. So I want to be in the right group of people, and I don't want to just spoil it and watch it by myself. I kind of want to share it, and then let's talk about it afterwards. So I need to be in LA with you guys so that I could watch it with you or Fialkov or somebody like that can
us cinema nerds, right?
Exactly, man. Exactly.
It's really easy to get entrenched, and I try to step outside of that by just sort of thinking about Jean-Luc Godard or Francois Truffaut, thinking about French New Wave. And we can look at Breathless now, and it makes complete sense to us because we've grown up in all the films that Breathless influenced.
Yes, exactly.
Jump cuts and handheld camera work and sort of expressionistic scene construction and all of that makes perfect sense to us. But for people that the most radical thing they'd seen to date was Roman Holiday, watching Breathless was like, well, this is an affront to all things cinema, right? But those guys, they wanted to turn the form over and see what they could find inside of it and do what they can. And so, I mean, I understand where Foster's coming from, but I think a true artist, not that she's not a true artist, I won't say that, but I think that being an artist continues to reward when you can make yourself fluid, when you can adapt to the changing technology, to the changing culture and climate, and take advantage of things. And while there are certainly things that you used to be able to do that are more difficult to do now, there are also things you can do now that were impossible before. Agreed. And I try to kind of turn my mind towards those things. And while I think the pageantry of cinema might have been reduced a bit because of the accessibility of content and the way people view the theatrical experience, and frankly, the quality of home viewing now is so high.
Oh my God, yes.
That's changed things. But there's also a deeper intimacy with filmmaking than you've ever had before. Agreed. Because you can carry them in your pocket. You can watch them on your phone. Hell, you can probably watch them on your smartwatch now if you try. So there's a lot to be done. I was looking at Instagram today, and they have video content, and I was thinking to myself, what can I do with this? What kind of interesting thing could I do here with this? So yeah, I'm still. Look, my soul is punk rock, John. I am. I'm still that dude, right? I'm that guy who's gonna, play the thing too loud, play the instruments wrong, and see where we can go. So the chaos magician in me is always excited at these new formats, but I can understand how for people that had a very specific understanding with cinema and a place in cinema, and a kind of method that they were able to apply and get corporate support, find less support for that methodology. I understand the frustration, but you have to either get destroyed by the future, or you can ride the wave of it, but you can't stop it.
Adapt.
You adapt and survive, right?
Right, adapt or die. Adapt or die. And again, and another person like that is Coppola. And it surprises me because Coppola came from that guerrilla filmmaking world.
It's crazy. It's crazy for Francis Ford Coppola to talk about the preservation of a whatever when Coppola was shattering these things,
right?
But it's all perception. It's all how.
And again, and after being successful, he kind of became. He went from being the radical to part of the establishment. Right. And like you say, he's that because I'm sure you saw those same quotes. He's like, movies are carnival rides now. I don't understand today's thing, and it's like, dude, then go to Amazon. Go to Netflix. I'm sure they would love your creativity. Hell, before Woody Allen got swept in the Me Too controversies and all that stuff got dug up again, Amazon was very happy to open its doors to him and say, make what you want. Well, we are here for you. Here are your resources. Make what you want. And we got Wonder Wheel, and we got Crisis in 6 Parts and things, and with varied degrees of success. And again, I admit to being fascinated by Woody Allen, the filmmaker. I'm very sorry about the terrible things that are, going on in his personal life and everything, and I won't judge that. And I can appreciate people who won't refuse to watch his movies because of that stuff. That said, again, he prior to the scandals, he found he knew to, okay, well, I can make my stuff here, and it still works, and I can't believe that Coppola can't figure that out.
Well, it's that argument has been with cinema the entire time. I mean, the first notable theatrical experience was a train coming towards the screen, and people ran away because they thought the train was going to hit them, right? Like cinema did not start with Italian neorealist works. Like that's not how it started. Like it started as spectacle. And,
absolutely.
And spectacle has always walked with cinema. And so now, yes, we're at a time when, most of the things that studios are supporting are spectacle experiences, and that's a little different than it has been before. But I also believe that things do get cyclical in a way. And
agreed.
We're essentially doing a radio program.
Right.
Like that's what's happening.
Of course we are. That's why I started podcasting. I'm doing my kind of radio show.
We have fiber optics. We have an Earth surrounded by satellites. We're talking to each other through computers that can be as small as a phone, what have you. But the result is basically radio, right?
Yep.
So there's gonna be a way that happens again. What Coppola is missing, what he's grieving isn't lost. It's just shifting and transforming and taking on another form. And there's a young Francis Coppola out there who's making Rumblefish, and maybe it's on YouTube right now, and maybe that's why Francis hasn't seen it, because he doesn't go to YouTube to watch things. But some kid somewhere made like an 89-minute thing, pure from the heart, shot on his cell phone or her cell phone, put it up on YouTube, and I haven't heard of it. You haven't heard of it, John. Francis hasn't heard of it. But there's like 3 million kids who've watched it, and it just speaks absolutely to them. And from that piece, Matt Dillon will come, right?
That's true. Yeah,
it's there, and it will, it'll be found again. So, you just kind of have to go with things. I mean, we had one of the biggest successes of the year was a Halloween film. So, who knows where we're going, right?
No, I'm with you. Yeah, you're right, man. No, it's true.
Think about, Creed is what? Rocky 8?
It is Rocky 8. 100% it is. Absolutely. Creed 2 is Rocky 8.
Because, I think I was spoken to before we started doing the podcast. So, I wrote this Dolph Lundgren movie when I was 22 or something called The Russian Specialist. And Dolph directed it. I wrote it. I got to hang out with Dolph for a couple months. It was a great experience. He's a great guy.
Very cool.
I'm so happy to see Dolph right back in the middle of things, And
agreed.
When I was watching Creed 2, I'm like, this is remarkable. Watching young people are having an experience with this, and they're talking about, well, now I have to go back and watch that old one. And,
that's true,
right? And so there's.
Hey, wait till they get to the robot.
Wait till they get to the robot. I was waiting for the Polly robot to show up, and was a little disappointed. If I have a conversation with Michael Jordan, I'm going to be like, man, what happened to the Polly robot?
For real, man. He should have been checking coats at Rocky's restaurant or something like that.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah, exactly. Happy birthday, Polly. Star filters and the whole thing, man. God bless.
Oh my God.
But yeah,
No, Dolph was amazing in Creed 2. He was that whole subplot was so fantastic. And you've been waiting for this Rocky and Drago conversation for literally 35 years. And it finally happens. Well, and it absolutely. I mean, I don't want. Because it's been out for a couple weeks. I don't mind talking about the movie. Yeah, we won't spoil it. But it pays off. It pays off.
It's because it's interesting. You didn't. Because obviously there's elements of Max Schmeling with Ivan Drago.
100%.
Clearly, that was on Stallone's mind. when he was doing it. And as I was going there wondering how he was going to sort of approach that, and because like the Max and Joe story is a really fascinating story.
I know it well. My buddy Bert Sugar helped. If he didn't write the screenplay for the film Max and Joe, he was definitely a creative consultant and was very proud of his participation. It's a good, if people haven't seen it, it pops up on Encore every now and then. And if you don't know, obviously Max Schmeling was the German world heavyweight champion. It was during the time of Hitler. He himself was not a Nazi, kind of had no choice but to be used as this like Nazi kind of idol. And really, I think in his post-war years, showed his true mettle, really stayed a friend with Joe Louis after Joe beat him and crushed him in the rematch. And really was like, I think at least, I don't know your point of view, but a real like a decent guy. And it became a very big, he was an executive at Coca-Cola, but like really like, when Joe was in his tough years, Joe Louis, Max Schmeling kind of had his back. And certainly when he passed away, Max was one of the guys saying, this guy deserves a real, national tribute. And he's buried at Arlington. I've seen Joe Louis's grave. And, I really think that, Schmeling kind of, like I said, I think was misunderstood, understandably why during the period, but it was a complicated relationship. And he certainly wasn't a fan of Hitler and what was happening in Germany.
Well, whether you're talking like kind of superheroes or sports figures and or what have you, there's certain relationships that form because your adversary is really the only person that can understand you, right? Like, and there's a unique relationship there, and that's like a kind of a really interesting aspect of warrior stories, whether they're like sports warriors or soldiers, or we've all heard the story about like World War I, how they all declared a ceasefire around Christmas and gave each other Christmas gifts. Yep. Because they all wanted to have Christmas. And so they had to figure out how to do it, and that's how they did it. And they'd go back to, turning each other into hamburger not so long after that. Right. But, I experienced something of the same thing when I was researching American Carnage. There's something that happens when you sit in front of a human being and you're open and you're honest with that person. Whatever the dogma is, whatever the programming is, it kind of falls away because our instinct is to connect. That's what we do as creatures. We have an instinct for genuine connection. Now because of social media and all of that, we can get distant from that with a bunch of really shallow interactions.
True.
And we're always worst at our shallow, in our shallow interactions. But what I would recognize is if I'm just sitting there and talking to someone and they got a shaved head and they got spider webs and 88s and lightning bolts and what have you, and they've got all their dogma, their pamphlet stuff, whatever they're doing, eventually, if I didn't respond to the anger and the aggression and the kind of the triggering stuff that they would try to do, people just start talking to you about what they feel. And when you listen to someone talking about what they feel, it's really hard for them to hate you. Now, I'm not saying that I changed anyone or that, any conversation I had with a white supremacist, they didn't suddenly, go out and start watching Will Smith movies. But it showed me, kind of what humanity is really about. And those are the things. Those are the moments that I remember, when I think about like sports stories or heroic mythological narratives and all that. I think about, someone having to give Ali a fight because he needed a fight, and someone understanding that. You came out of prison, you need a fight. I'm going to give you a fight, right? And the knowledge of what the adversary goes through because you might go through it too, and those are the things that kind of stay in your heart and stay in your mind, right? So there's just a lot there to explore and learn from.
In the same tone as American Carnage, do you remember the Deborah Winger, Tom Berenger film, Betrayed?
Oh, yeah, the Costa Robbins film. I mentioned it on Twitter because that film terrified me as a kid.
I understand.
Because I think I'd seen Tom Berenger in something else where I was supposed to like him, and I did.
Oh, yeah, he was kind of like I think a lot of people thought of him, and it's crazy now because he's sadly looks more like Dick Cheney than the comparison I'm about to make. But there was a time where Tom Berenger really looked like a young Paul Newman again, and was a romantic lead. And, you know, certainly in The Big Chill, he kind of has a Tom Selleck look about him and stuff, and plays kind of a Tom Selleck-y kind of actor that's in a Magnum sort of show.
That's someone to watch he was very, like Shoot to Kill, right?
Yes,
like,
and of course Major League.
Major League. I think, you know what? I think that might have been it. I think Betrayed came out after Major League. So
I think you're right, around the same time. Yeah.
So, you know, I had the kind of this friendly idea of Tom Berenger, and so when I watched Betrayed, because I grew up on HBO, right?
Sure.
Which says a lot about why my mind is in the way it is.
And it was kind of the Tom Berenger network, because they used to play the hell out of all those movies.
Oh man, yeah, like, you know, I was watching Dream On way before I should be watching Dream On, right?
Oh, I love Dream On.
Brian Benben. God bless Brian Benben, wherever you are. So yeah, like and I was like, I don't know, like 12 or 13 or something. And when you're like 13 and, you know, you're like a straight kid growing up in St. Louis, Deborah Winger speaks to you in a way you're not really ready for, right? you're like,
I believe it.
I'm kind of into her, but she also looks like a school teacher, and I don't quite know how to feel about it. And, you know, because you don't have like a nuanced understanding of like crushes, so you had like Jessica Rabbit style stuff. You get that, right? But
I'm with you.
Deborah Winger is like, I'm really into her, and she kind of looks like the next door neighbor, and
yeah,
whatever.
Exactly, girl next door. No, tough girl next door. Like,
yeah.
You know, but a heart of gold, absolutely.
Like a movie like Betrayed will have you trying to date Deborah Winger all the way through college, right? It'll just you won't realize that every girlfriend looks like Deborah Winger because you saw Betrayed when you were 12.
And again, and Tom Berenger playing this white supremacist,
right?
That seems to be, as you just said, someone that you can relate to one-on-one. Maybe he isn't a bad guy. Maybe he can change. Maybe I'm wrong. Because she's undercover dealing with this white supremacist group. And yeah, it's like you sympathize with the bad guy. And it's like, oh, maybe she will be able to turn him. And that's kind of the question of the movie and stuff. And what does she do? I mean, should she fall for this good-looking guy that she seems to be connecting with in non-political ways or non-terrible racial ways, and then instead, no, it's or is he really a monster no matter what? It's very interesting, and it's really a very nuanced movie. I don't know how it will play today. Because we are so polarized.
Oh, Lord have mercy! If that movie came out today, it would be see. That's the thing, John. Like, I'm not, I'm only 41, so I'm not the oldest guy in the world, but I've been through a couple cultural cycles, right?
I'm with you.
And sometimes I'm looking at people and I'm like, y'all realize what I grew up on, right? Like this thing that is like a Leviathan, like whatever movie is the latest Lovecraftian horror that has to be like banished before it drives us all mad. I'm like, I saw the uncut RoboCop when I was 16.
There you go, man.
You know, like, things were like, can you like Betrayed might work today because it's so pointed and dramatic and all of that. You know what would get you run out of Hollywood? 48 hours. You can't make 48 hours now. Like, if you made that now, man, I think everyone would pick at you from every side.
I'm gonna have to rewatch it. I mean, I know what you mean in certain scenes. Certainly, when he's in the white bar and would you like a black Russian and all,
It's really like Nolte's character, his relationship to Eddie Murphy's character, how Nolte is probably still a bigot at the end of the movie, but just maybe not towards Reggie Hammond.
Yeah, you're one of the good ones, Reggie.
Right? You're like you get to be one of the. Well, I guess I like you, okay. So,
you're right, man.
So like I don't. That is
interesting.
It's rough because my wife hasn't seen a lot of those pictures from that era. So she and I will go on like a late 70s movie kick or 80s movie kick, and she'll watch something and be kind of like, whoa. They would just do that in a Hollywood movie, huh? And I'm like, yeah, it would just be in a movie. It wouldn't even be a big deal. It's just in the movie.
Yeah. The Rocky movies. God, I just read a great essay, and I wish I could remember which website it was. Probably Slate. I believe it was Slate, talking about how the Creed films really redeem a lot of the ugly racial tones in the early Rocky movies. And some of the stuff I remembered, some of the stuff I had completely forgotten. The bartender and Rocky are watching Apollo, and Apollo's saying all the right things. Stay in school, don't be a stinker, be a thinker, and all that stuff. And, the bartender totally, comes out with a racial epithet, and it's like, I didn't even remember that. Holy shit. Yeah. And thankfully, Rocky, at the very least, is like, what are you talking about? This guy, put his ass on the line, and he made something of himself. What have you done with your life? But he doesn't say, hey, don't talk like that or whatever. He doesn't correct the guy or anything, because sadly, it was the early 70s, all in the family world and stuff like that. That shit just flew. Yeah, and sadly, and a lot of times it was out there to show, like in the case of Archie Bunker, that it's inappropriate behavior, but just as many people cheered as were shocked and appreciated what Norman Lear and company were trying to do with Archie.
Well, yeah, and I always look at what seems to be the intent of the work rather than a moment that might bristle me the wrong way, right? And I'm really hard to offend, John. It takes a lot to offend me.
Okay.
You'd have to say something about my actual mother, and not even a yo mama, because that's too vague. You'd have to hit me with specifics, right, to really get me.
Okay.
So, and I do understand the reaction that people have, but for me, that made Rocky feel more real. And
I hear you. Yeah.
It also made the relationship between Rocky and Apollo feel more real, because you knew where it had to come from. And, although Clubber Lang is a cartoon of a thing, the interesting thing is Rocky III, with its weird blaxploitation aspects, also kind of has perspective from Apollo and Apollo's world and all of that. And
true. Yes.
There's something, there's something authentic about it, even if it's rough around the edges and it can kind of take us the wrong way, and I don't know about this scene and that scene. But I still sort of appreciate it because in a holistic way, the heart is kind of always in the right place.
I agree.
And that's what matters. To me, I mean, I was just really glad that I had a bad taste in my mouth, really just from how the Apollo Creed story sort of just wound up after 4, right?
Totally.
It's because it seemed like there was a point when, for a while, Rocky was influencing everything Stallone was doing, and everything was a permutation of Rocky in a way, where it was authentic from the streets, doing the thing, movies like Fist, things
over
like
the
that,
top,
over the top,
the
right?
wrestling movie,
even a picture like Nighthawks, right?
By the way, I love Nighthawks. It's a terrible, straight up violent cop movie, but I love it.
Right?
Exactly, Rutger Hauer, man.
I'd do a Nighthawks sequel. Call me Stallone. So, it was still sort of based in that, I sort of want to be Scorsese, or I'm in a Scorsese kind of mode. Then when Rambo hit, not First Blood, because First Blood is a film.
It's an amazing film.
Rambo is
exactly
a movie,
where you're going,
right?
Yep.
Rambo is like if The Simpsons were to do a sequel to First Blood as something Homer was going to watch. That's what Rambo
Castle.
First Blood Part 2 is, right? And I love it because it's insane. But after Rambo First Blood Part 2, Rambo took over Stallone's voice. So Rocky 4 is the post-Rambo Rocky. When it's rendered as an action film, and in an action film, the partner gets killed in the beginning.
That's right. That's right.
So it got kind of infected with action movie ethics, even though, and because Drago's basically a cyborg, it's an interesting picture.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I agree. And no, they did. They got very cartoony. Thank God they righted the ship. I think first starting with Rocky Balboa.
Oh yeah,
and really the 2 Creed movies. They're truly Rocky's trajectory as a character, because really things really disintegrated by Rocky 5, and then I think everybody realized what went wrong. Well, Rocky Balboa has a lot of dignity to it.
Like my haircut and my fashion sense, Rocky 5 was a victim of the 90s. It was a weird time. It was a weird time.
I know.
So, what you got to do?
Hey, I was in the front row seat of every one of those.
Yeah, we were all there. We were all there. We Tommy the Machine Gun. That was a whole thing. Tommy Morrison. That was a whole thing.
It's funny. I was telling another friend today. No lie. When Morrison fought Foreman, their press tour came through town, and I got to spend time not only interviewing them on the record, but also I've had downtime with Foreman a million times, and he's a fascinating man, and I really am thrilled that I got to interview him as many times as I did. But it was the one time I really got to talk to Tommy Morrison on and off the record, and we were the same age, and I spent like downtime with him, and I'm like, this has got to be a little overwhelming. He's like, it's really overwhelming. And this is years after Rocky V, and after he had already had a couple losses, so he wasn't an undefeated contender or anything. He was really kind of coming back against George.
Right.
And I'm like, how are you handling it? And he goes, it's tough at times. And we really had this real conversation for like 20 minutes. And I'm like, well, do you have friends that you can talk to? That he's like, oh, yeah, back in Oklahoma and everything. And he goes, they stay with me and they travel with me. I'm like, well, Jesus, man, I'm like, good luck. I'm like, I'm sure this is a lot of pressure. And, I'm like, you're a talented guy. I hope everything works out. And
it's gotta be
unfortunately, it didn't, but it was really sad. I really felt bad for the guy.
It's got to be so hard when you're a real athlete, you're a talented athlete. And then you show up in a movie, which is a great opportunity, but then a whole, millions of people now know you that didn't know you before, but they know you as the guy in the movie, and that can kind of tarnish your reputation as an athlete. And now when you perform as an athlete, it can feel a bit like a stunt.
Yeah.
And you don't think about those things when the opportunity to be in like a Rocky picture shows up and you want to go ahead and take it. It's all incredibly interesting. I've spoken to Stallone on the phone once.
Wow.
That was an amazing experience, but
I bet
I've never sat down with a guy, and he's like a guy that if I would just love to have a cup of coffee. I don't even know if he drinks coffee, a protein shake.
I know what you meant. Yeah, exactly.
And just
whatever you ingest, Sly.
Yeah, whatever tomato juice, whatever it is, man. Just to sit down and just listen, like that's a guy. It's like, I don't write a book, Sylvester. Like, do a podcast. I need you to share it all, brother. Like, I need you to share it all.
On El Rey, he had those sit-downs with Robert Rodriguez,
right?
That director's chair series. And I love that Rodriguez does that because he's the kind of guy, filmmaker to filmmaker, he knows the right questions to ask. That series, Guillermo del Toro was on there, John Carpenter was on there, and he did one with Stallone. And and again, not enough. I agree with you. I hope that Stallone is writing his autobiography.
Talking about a documentary, right? I would love to do like a Stallone documentary.
Totally.
I'm just fascinated with that guy.
Everything from the bombs like Oscar and, what was his movie? Rhinestone with...
Rhinestone, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. But I even liked the cop, if it wasn't a cop movie, I don't know, Bullet to the Head.
Bullet to the Head, yeah, for sure.
I liked it. I really liked it, man. And even the first Prison Break. I'm like, okay, entertaining enough. Decent popcorn movie.
Guy's got chops, man. Like, I wanted him to be the Punisher for a long time.
He would have made an excellent Punisher, 100%.
My wife,
he would have made a great Nick Fury.
Totally. My wife was watching Assassins the other day.
I love that movie.
It's like The Missing Link, right? It's like the movie that bridges Stallone from like the 80s to the 2000s. It's like this weird, and like the Wachowskis wrote it. And like Richard Donner directed, and
I didn't know the Wachowskis wrote Assassins.
The Wachowskis wrote Assassins.
Wow.
Yeah, like Dick Donner directed it. Julianne Moore's in there. Yes. It's just one of those things where like the '90s happened, and
I like The Specialist that way too. Go on.
Oh, this with a John Barry score that's gorgeous, by the way. Yeah. Like, some of my favorite John Barry cues are in The Specialist. Like, Will You Call Me, that little jazzy bit, like that can play it on piano. But
you're killing me.
Yeah, like it's these pictures are insane. Like, if I look people in the eye and be like, that there's a movie where Sylvester Stallone is trying to kill James Woods over Sharon Stone with hidden bombs, and Rod Steiger plays a Cuban, and this is a real film. Yep. Like, this is
more audacious than Charlton Heston being the Mexican guy in Touch
with
of
a
Evil.
John
Absolutely.
Barry score backing all of this up.
You're right, man. No, I agree with you. And truly a fascinating career. Absolutely. And I hope he stays true to his word, because the way Creed 2 ends, it's like Rocky doesn't need to show up anymore. His story's over. They should leave it exactly where they leave it, I think.
Yeah. I just pity the fool who doesn't put Mr. T in the third one.
Honestly, that, I understand. And again, in that Slate essay about the whole Rocky film series, they make a really strong point about Clubber Lang, and how, Clubber Lang's an asshole to Rocky, fine, but like, he's just working hard and doing everything he should be doing as an up-and-coming fighter, and training hard, and is very focused, and there's really kind of like actually Clubber Lang, they make him the bad guy, and then all of a sudden, okay, Rocky learns how to fight like Apollo, and he's fighting better. It's like, yeah, okay.
You ain't so bad. You ain't so bad.
But that, hey, man, it's a fun action moment.
I used to say that when I would spar people in Taekwondo class. They had you ain't so bad. Come on, fight. Come on, fight. You ain't so bad. You know what I want to see? I want to see Clubber Lang in his second or third act of his life with like grills on the Home Shopping Network. And like a sitcom. Like, that's what I want to see. I want us to cut to Clubber Lang, and he's on a sitcom. Everyone loves Clubber.
That's fantastic.
And he's just like rich, and everyone loves him now. I think
reinvention. I understand, man. I live that story watching George Foreman. Absolutely.
That would be amazing. that's
hilarious.
That's what I'd love to see.
Now, do you have enough energy to still talk about Titans? I love these tangents we've gone on.
Oh yeah. I can give you like another 20 minutes or so.
All right, very good. Then let's spend it talking Titans, dude. As I told you before we started recording, I am a convert. I was, as many were when we saw the trailer. We're like, I don't know, man. I don't know. But I was like, you know something? I'll get it. I want to see it. If it sucks, I'll cancel my DC Universe subscription. No harm, no foul. I'm enjoying it. I think it's great. I'm through Hawk and Dove, the second episode with Hawk and Dove.
Right on.
And I love the characters are definitely different. If you're a Wolfman and Perez fan and you haven't watched it, expect a different interpretation of a lot of the core characters. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. And it's at least interesting, and it explains the differences in a very matter-of-fact way, and again, it's your choice to accept it or not. It's like me with the X-Men. I'm not the biggest X-Men fan, and I always respected what Wolfman and Perez did with Titans, but I wasn't a teenager, so it didn't speak to me the way it did, people your age and even younger and everything. So it didn't hurt me when we saw what Bryan Singer did with the X-Men and Brett Ratner or whatever and the others. And the same goes with this Titans show. It's like, you're not offending me with a different interpretation. I appreciate it. And it's a great story. And we can start just with the core characters. No, I really do. I mean, honestly, yeah. I mean, Jeff himself, Jeff Johns, has told me one of the greatest things about Dick Grayson is he's like the most liked person in the DC comic book universe, because he's the most personable guy. And Jeff put it in a great way. He's like, if you're stuck and you got to do a cross-country road trip, you want Dick Grayson next to you. Oh, totally. Because he's a great guy. Everybody loves him. You know that he's just got his head straight. And this Dick Grayson is still finding himself. And in that, I don't know, if I'm not with Batman, I don't know who I am. And that's kind of one of the main story points of the series right now. And I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, the early on in the process, Jeff talked to us about wanting to capture the effect of the Wolfman and Perez stories, but we didn't have to marry ourselves to their details. Now, part of that is just the necessity of the format, right? Like, certain things moving into live action, you want to handle certain things, you handle them the way you do. But yeah, I mean, the great thing about working with Jeff and Akiva and Greg Walker, the showrunner, is they harness a lot of creativity, and then they can focus it to where they need it to go. And with Dick Grayson, we knew we had Brenton, and Brenton is an incredibly likable guy. He's a nice guy. He's an interesting guy. and and he embodies a lot of those qualities innately. And when you have an actor that's like that, you can do things that are interesting and know you're not going to kind of stray too far off the course. And like Anna is awesome, as Corey, and
yes,
it's as great as Rachel, and Ryan is great as Gar.
Absolutely, the core is fantastic. Truly, these actors. And again, there are differences in these portrayals than what we saw in the comics. It's okay. Their stories are interesting. I don't, it's still a mystery in terms of Corey's origins, at least where I am at the series, which is episode 9, the second time we see Hawk and Dove. And, I look forward to finding out where that story goes. Is she going to be an alien? Is she going to be some sort of ancient, a representative of some sort of ancient race? I don't want the answer. I'm happy to wait. But yeah, that's an interesting mystery. Raven, and again, I want your comments. I liked in the comics that she was a person that knew she came from demons and kind of a more adult character. I like the romance with her and Wally in the comics. But I've grown to like this young kid that is, a contemporary of Gar's. And confused with who she is rather than the faded, like kind of almost like Spectre-like sort of, faded character that, this is why I need to separate myself from the group. I know what I am, and I can't really be always a part of the group because of this darkness in me and stuff. Whereas this kid wants to be just normal and everything, and it's sympathetic and it's different, but I really do like the way that you guys are playing it.
Well, you can't really do a comic book team story that wrestles with adolescence without wrestling with that critical part of adolescence, which is not really knowing who you are and being afraid of what you might be.
Yep.
And that's something that we wanted to engage, just from a psychological point of view, and to ground things with reality, when it serves us, to just make things a bit more visceral because of it. Like, I'm really fond of that scene I put together when Gar talks to Rachel about what it's like to transform. I think it was in episode 5 or something.
Yes.
And that was born out of me wanting to see that scene in the X-Men movies, me wanting to see that sort of authentic exploration of the experience, and how that could build like real human connection, about it. And they give us a lot of space, the producers and everyone, to explore those ideas. And I wasn't incredibly familiar with the Titans coming into the show. I'm a Batman guy. I'm dyed in the wool when it comes to Batman. And because of that, I'm very familiar with, a lot of Dick Grayson stuff. But I wasn't a guy who's reading a lot of Titans, because I didn't read a lot of comics that would go cosmic very often.
Okay.
And so when you had characters, like Coriander or like Raven, those weren't really the books I was reading. I was reading a lot more of like the kind of, post Frank Miller, I guess, style of like superhero storytelling, or like,
I'm with you,
like John Byrne's Man of Steel, which I loved. But it was very sort of like a kind of a classic rendering of Superman in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it was a very grounded too. Eventually he goes off in space, but a lot of it had to do with like Metropolis and street level problems and things like that.
Yeah, like him handing Batman kryptonite so Batman could kill him if he went too far.
The best, one of the best scenes. Absolutely, man. Seriously, that was great.
I still have a crush on that Lois Lane that's on the cover with the black skirt and the bangs.
I'm with you, and the weirdly purple hair.
Oh man, I spent all of high school looking for some John Byrne dimples.
That's so fun. By the way, I love Corey's Batgirl almost color of her both dress and costume, because it's so funny. I suppose it was probably the same palette as in the comics, that there was like, or well, actually that's not true, because Batgirl in the comics had more of a classic bat sort of suit, but this kind of looks like Yvonne Craig's kind of color scheme as far as Batgirl and Corey go.
Just like seeing like how much effort goes into the wardrobe and the costumes and how it all comes together. It's like I've been telling you, John, it is a wild ride being me right now.
It's got to be, man. That's awesome.
Being in the center of all this stuff and and being able to write something and then have the actors say it, it's. I remember when I was on set for episode 7.
That's Asylum.
Yes, and I was having a conversation with Brenton about something about the scene, whatever, and and he was dressed in the Robin suit. And like part of me is like 12 years old talking to Robin, and I'm trying to not show that to him because that would invalidate me instantly in the eyes of the thespian. But he looks a lot like Robin's supposed to look.
Yeah. So
it's really hard, and then we'd have the conversation, we'd go off and we would do it, and then inside I'm like giggling because like there's Robin, right? And working on a show like Titans is like having a moment like that 4 times a day, every day, right? Where you're just like, first you freak out because you're just in a room with Jeff Johns for like 6 hours, right? You're like, how did this happen? And then maybe like like once a month or something, Jeff like looks at you and says like, you did a good job with that thing, and you're like, well, that feels good. And then at the same time, you're in a room with Akiva Goldsman.
Amazing.
And like you grew up watching his movies. You studied his movies to learn how to write your own stuff.
Understood.
Right?
Yes, indeed.
And it keeps you humble. And Greg, I didn't know much about a lot of his work going into the show because I didn't know a lot about TV. I didn't know many showrunners, but
Berlanti, or no, the showrunner. Excuse me.
Yeah,
Greg Walker. Go on. What other shows? What other shows does he run?
He ran like Without a Trace like forever.
Oh wow.
He ran that Halle Berry show Extant. He comes out of like the Chris Carter space. Worked in the X-Files.
Oh wow. Okay.
He did a little bit of Smallville with Mark Verheiden way back in the day.
Very cool.
And he's just done like so much stuff, and you're like, whoa, like this is the landscape I'm in, and it's actually stuff that I use in the writing. I mean, I can put some of those feelings inside of Gar Logan, right? Like
that's cool.
Like whoa,
sure,
like all that whoa energy, it comes out of a lot of that. So it's really like a full circle journey for me because in 1 year, I went from not really doing anything with DC at all, besides like Michael Cray, which was in its own like the Wildstorm universe, so it wasn't.
Yes, indeed.
To writing 5 issues of Detective, preparing to write Outsiders, and then writing Robin in a television show, which is like the trifecta for the Batman nerd, right? Like, it's
amen, absolutely.
Like the Batman gods have smiled upon me this day. So. It's a lot. But everyone is it's a really great unit. We don't have any personality issues to deal with, which is rare on these things. But we don't. Everyone kind of gets along really well.
Cool.
And it's just a phenomenal experience to be part of. And because you have different characters like Corey and Gar and Dick, and Raven. There's elements of everything. There's like Jason Bourne-like action. There's traditional like 70s Dario Argento style horror. There's there's the sci-fi aspects, and there's a little bit of sitcom in there. And as a writer, you're able to play with all of these different styles and get to write so many different kinds of things and blend them all together. Like the episode 5 I wrote is basically a Western. It's
sure.
The team moves in. They're putting themselves up in the overnight place in the town, and then here come the Black Hats to try to get them. And what are they going to do, right? So it's got a very kind of Western feel, and
it's Rio Bravo. Yeah,
Rio Bravo, totally one of my favorite pictures.
Love that movie. Absolutely, man.
Assault on Precinct 13. I love anything based on Ghosts of Mars, even whatever. It's still based on.
Sure. Yes.
And then, episode 7, Asylum, is kind of more in the psychological horror space.
Absolutely.
Where yes. I get, I put some nods to Thomas Harris in there. There's a little bit of Lecter kind of going on in some of those
Definitely.
bits.
Definitely some Lecter in there. Yes, indeed.
And a kind of an older Brad Anderson picture called Session 9 that's about Insane Asylum. I kind of use that as a reference, kind of in that place. And
very cool.
The greatest thing about the show for me is how... Because I have a lot of influences. My interests are very syncretic, and I struggle a little bit to find outlets for all the different kinds of energies that I have. Right, and the great thing about Titans, the way it's constructed, and really, I guess from like Marv and and George and the old DC regime that put them all together. They created a narrative world where you can sort of do many different kinds of things, and I appreciate it, and we're able to do that. And I'm really excited about what we're doing for the season. We're back at work in season 2.
Fantastic.
Grateful for everyone that's watched it and tweeted me and told me they enjoyed my work, and I really genuinely appreciate every single one. And if I don't say thank you, it's because I didn't see it. And I try as hard as I can to go through and thank everybody, because it really means a lot that someone would take a look at something that I've done and take their time to tell me that they enjoyed it. So yeah, Titans has been a fantastic experience, and I'm just proud to be a small part of it.
And if people are still on the fence of getting the series or not, or getting the streaming service to see the series, honestly, Brian, your episodes are fantastic. Also, the Doom Patrol episode is everything you want it to be, because that's the thing. There are differences about the core Titans, but it's interesting that the introduction of the other DC heroes in this series. First of all, the Doom Patrol, and I'm a huge fan of Jeff's interpretation of the Doom Patrol that he has done in previous Titan stories and the like. That was that episode was perfect, and absolutely everything you wanted in a Doom Patrol film or television appearance. It pays off. Hawk and Dove, and it was real. I mean, I enjoyed their first appearance. Their second appearance that really goes into the full history of the Hawk and Dove dynamic, and Don isn't forgotten, because at first it really is.
Oh yeah, Akiva directed
Hank and
that.
Donna.
Yeah,
what's that?
I think Akiva directed that himself.
Okay, it makes sense, and I really, and also they introduce what I believe to be, without spoiling, a different idea of their origin that gets very dark, but it makes sense for the Hawk and Dove dynamic. It certainly explains Hank's character in a much more sympathetic way.
Well, and the guy who plays Hawk, he's such a nice guy. That's
cool.
To be, a guy who looks like an action figure.
Oh my God, yes. Oh Jesus, man. Yeah, you're right.
Part of the most difficult thing.
He's a Drago. He could have been Drago if Rocky IV were made today.
Oh, absolutely. The most difficult thing about working on a show like this is that you're around people that have just won the genetic lottery twice. And it can make you feel like an orc sometimes. Like, if you find yourself having a conversation with Anna Diop and Minka Kelly, you just want to cover yourself in like a robe and don't look upon me.
Exactly.
It's like, why are you speaking to Quasimodo, right? So that it's a crucible that you have to rebuild your ego afterwards. But the good part is, everyone is so incredibly nice, right? Like,
that's cool.
I could probably go without hearing a PA gasp at how cute Brenton is. If that never happens again, that would be all right. But it will happen again, because life is what it is. And he's like so shy about it, which just makes it even worse, because he's like nice about it, and you're like, can you be bad at something? Can you just, like, I don't know, man, slap the bagel out of my hand so I know you're a
Scott Porter is like that too. Scott Porter is like Matt and I on Old Gorgeous and stuff, and it just kills me because he's an incredibly nice, down to earth guy.
Yes.
And he's like, oh, I love Word Balloon. I'm like, what are you wasting your time listening to my crap? I'm like, you're Scott Porter. Go out and have fun, man. If I looked like you, I wouldn't be listening to my show. I'd be having fun, man.
Yeah, it's like, like Minka is on set or something, and you're just like,
oh my God,
you look so cool. I just want to throw something at you. I know. Just to take you off the game a little, just
take you down a peg. I'm with
you. Yeah, just so I can see you react, right?
Oh man, but really those, especially, and I literally just saw today the Hawk and Dove, the second Hawk and Dove episode. It's heartbreaking.
Oh yeah,
and it really goes to the core of both Hank and Donna and Hank and Don in a great new modern way that absolutely fits. And I'm assuming, again, I think it might have been made for the series, because I've read several, unless there is some sort of reboot that gave this dark origin to Hank and Don. I don't remember that ever being there before.
Well,
and I've really, since the Crisis, when they killed Don, I really haven't seen Don's story explored. It's always been more about Hank and Dawn versus Hank and Don, and it was I really liked what they did, and it again because it's easy to dismiss Don because he was the pacifist,
right?
The way that Ditko and whoever was, if it was Steve Skates or whoever writing it originally. So yeah, again, and I loved those even early '70s Titan stories where Hank and Don were part of the Titans and everything, and showing up. It's really, really great. And Donna Troy, good Lord.
Oh,
I mean, what a perfect characterization for Donna Troy.
Yeah, and Connor Leslie, the actor, is just one of the most interesting kind of people I've met in a while. She's a great photographer in real life. Her Instagram.
Oh, that's interesting because they made her. I don't know if Donna was ever a photographer in the comics, but yeah, that's part of the story too. That she's a great photographer.
Yeah, it's like this super smart. Like it's kind of embodies like the stability, the kind of the wisdom.
Yes.
The wisdom beyond the years sort of thing, and she has like a bit of a regal quality about her when you meet her in real life. So yeah, it's remarkable. Like it's a great experience to be a part of, and what Jeff and Greg, and Akiva have been able to accomplish is I'm constantly impressed by it, because even when you're writing the scripts and you're breaking the stories and you're doing the whole thing, I don't see all the edits come together because I'm not in post production all the time.
Sure,
and I'm still you just don't really know what you have really. In my episodes, I got to work with two really excellent directors. Mira Minon was the director of episode 5. She's wonderful. Alex Kaliminos directed episode 7, equally wonderful, and two very different styles. And that's something that's great about TV, is you get to work with filmmakers, because I have weird aspirations to make a film at some point. And to be able to work with those filmmakers and see how they approach the material and work with actors and kind of run the set, that's awesome. So, I feel like I'm going to graduate school, but I'm getting paid.
I understand.
Which is great, because I still owe NYU money. So it all balances itself out. But,
I hear you, man.
But yeah, definitely stick with it. I mean, Titans goes to some places in the first season, and you're going to want to kind of keep it going, because I think we kind of bring more and more surprises as the show goes on.
Well, when you're ready with Outsiders, and honestly, man, as you know, anytime you have time in the future to come back, you're always welcome. I've really appreciated the two conversations we've had on the record, and also I appreciate what you as you're talking about your filmmaking exploration. You've been very vocal about it as well on social media, and much like you were explaining about what a Kubrick might do with Instagram. I know you are like flirting with the possibilities of YouTube and some other things to do, some experimentation.
I'll have some weird, new wave thing that I throw out there, probably sooner than later. Cool. Like I said, punk rock still to the core.
Hey, man, again, as you know, and as I told you off the air after our first conversation, that's why Word Balloon exists, man. I wasn't getting creatively, not to impress the sun or imprint this on you, but to, the dissatisfaction I have in my broadcasting career, rather than get angry, it's like make your own shit and do what you want to do, and that's what I'm doing with Word Balloon. That's
my, that's kind of like my governing, principle of productivity is, put it, make more art, right? Like at the end of the day, like whatever it is, channel it into a project and use it, because whatever feeling, and actually this is a good place to end it, I really do feel like the universe wakes up things in us, and it does not wake up something in us that we're not prepared to follow through. So it's not cruel, right? The universe is not a cruel place. So when you have those instincts to do things, to get something started, remember, it all starts with simple steps. And if you're listening to this and you've got creative aspirations of your own, follow them. Because there was a time not so long ago when I was just jotting ideas down in a napkin in a bar, not really sure if I was ever going to have a career, right? So we all start in that place, and we can all get to a better one. So, keep working, and keep writing, and take care.
It's all about the journey, as you say in the Killmonger miniseries, and I agree. And I think that's what makes that story interesting. And American Carnage, both series off to great starts. And again, man, your work on Titans, excellent stuff. And truly, man, thank you for allowing me to be at least, someone to observe the journey from your standpoint. And I look forward to future conversations. And, yeah, this is a marathon, but honestly, man, great stuff. And I know a lot of people, creative people that are inspired to make their own stuff will definitely take a lot from our conversation. So thanks a lot, man.
Thank you for having me, John.
There you go, another fun talk. I hope it entertained you while you were going through your workday or Christmas shopping or working out. Maybe you were on a long, trek, commute, or just traveling for the holidays to a holiday party. But a really nice conversation with Bryan Hill. He's going to be back. And again, one of these guys, and I feel the same way about the women, that I appreciate them, like I said, letting me be an observer as their career evolves. And they get into some really interesting jobs, great opportunities for collaboration, and we get to hear it firsthand here at Word Balloon. Honestly, this is what interests me, and I'm really glad that it interests you as well, because these are, inspiring conversations if you're a budding creator, and just entertaining as well. I mean, it's the DVD commentary, if you will, of some of these creators as they go through their creative process. Really enjoyed today's show. I hope you did as well. It was all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Truly, League, thank you very much for your support, especially at times like this, the holiday season, the end of the year. I can reflect and thank you for your direct support through Patreon. If you want to help out and subscribe to Word Balloon, patreon.com/wordballoon, or click on the Patreon ad at the front page of wordballoon.com. As always, thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. You can go to your local shop right now. You will find amazing books. They don't pull the punches, man. They have attractive covers, and what's inside is attractive as well. Great series that deserve your attention. These are books like Cullen Bunn and Dalibor's Talajak's Witchhammer, that's coming out on Wednesday the 19th. It's Aftershock's first original graphic novel. You got things like Animosity by Marguerite Bennett and Raphael de la Tour, Lollipop Kids from Adam and Aidan Glass and Diego Yapur. Garth has a ton of books at Aftershock, among them Jimmy's Bastards, and of course A Walk Through Hell. These are tremendous books, great genres, great creators, and something fresh on the pages that you will appreciate and the person you're shopping for will absolutely appreciate as well. Check them out. You will find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on all of these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Thanks again for listening to Word Balloon. More great stuff coming in the days ahead. We're only midway through December, and lots more great conversations are coming up. Very excited about the conversations I already have lined up, and very excited as well about those that are, they just haven't been locked down in terms of conversation, but they're coming in the days and weeks ahead, and some old favorites are coming back, and also new conversations as well. I hope you'll join me for the journey. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2018.